We're back for part two of the Tellis trial, where he is accused of having slain investigative journalist Jeff Gehrman. We did hear this morning opening statements from the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution laid out quite a bit of evidence that is likely going to come to light in the trial here. The police apparently discovered several things that resemble the attire that the assailant wore when the assailant murdered Mr. Those things were cut up. They were perhaps in an effort and the defense then didn't really go after the evidence itself. The defense basically painted a portrait, essentially a conspiracy theory, whereby the police is apparently trying to frame Mr. Tellis for this crime. Now, some of the things that he said actually made sense. Some of them don't seem to have the effect that I think he was going for. He spent quite a bit of time talking about the people in the public administrator's office who were accusing Mr. Tellis of creating a hostile work environment and essentially saying that their stories were false and that Mr. Tellis was actually trying to clean up the public administrator's office. But even if that was the case, even if everything that he said was true, even if everything that these people who are claiming a hostile work environment and the things that they allege in their complaint against Mr. Tellis and the public administrator's office, even if everything they say is false and everything that the defense attorney says is true, well, it still leaves the fact that Mr. Gehrman published these articles that painted Mr. Tellis in a very negative light with respect to the goings on in the public administrator's office. And it's good to see you here, Jeff. Thanks for coming back. The goings on in the public administrator's office were, if Mr. Tellis was in a negative light with respect to that, well, then perhaps he lost his election and could not remain as the public administrator due directly to Mr. Gehrman's articles. And if that's the case, the defense wants you to believe that that is not a motive for murder. And the prosecution is saying, well, yes, in fact, it is. Now, something that hasn't been discussed, and I don't know if it will during this trial, but Mr. Tellis was previously picked up by the police after his wife called the police due to a domestic dispute. And Mr. Tellis cited the fact that he was a public official to the police, seemingly in an effort to get out of those charges. Eventually, those charges were dropped. So I doubt that we'll get into it here, but the fact that his wife had to call the police department on Mr. Tellis is somewhat telling of potentially his propensities in certain situations. And his dialogue with the police is also kind of telling as well. I urge you to go look at those videos. There are some videos online of that interaction. Dateline has that up. I cannot play it for you because I will get a copyright strike, as I already have, for playing snippets of the Dateline video. So I won't be doing that again. Go check out Dateline if you want to see that. Um, it sounds like we're getting back into court here. Things are getting started. Usually, it takes a little while uh, for the jury to take their seats and everything like that, and for the court to actually begin. So we will wait for that. Here's where you can find that 911 call and body camera footage, that YouTube link right there.
Please remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Holly Bailey, HOLLYBAILEY.
Have a seat. Thank you very much. Ma'am, if you could, tell me where you live.
Northwest area, Brown Circle.
On Bronze Circle. Who do you live there with?
My husband and our daughter.
Okay. And do you know someone, or did you know someone by the name of Jeff Gehrman?
Yes.
How did you know Jeff?
He's just been our neighbor for 27 years,
Okay. Where did Jeff live in relation to your house?
directly across the street.
What's the kind of shape of the street? Is it just a straightaway, or?
Small cul-de-sac, like 11 homes.
Okay. I want to turn your attention to September 2nd of 2022.
Was that Friday?
I believe so. On that day, does something kind of catch your attention with respect to Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. Or actually, September 2nd. So what do you notice?
Well, he never leaves his garage door open, and I noticed it was open and his car was in there. And it was, I was running errands that morning, and then when I came home a little while later, around noon, I think it was open, and it's never open.
Okay.
Never.
Now, at this time, I'm going to show opposing counsel what's been marked as Stage Proposed Exhibit 2. Hey, first witness, let the record reflect on showing the witness Stage Proposed 2. Ma'am, take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize what you're looking at there?
Yes.
Is that, what is that?
That's his home.
Okay. Is that roughly, kind of from a perspective, facing from your home, kind of looking over in that direction?
Directly across the street.
Okay. At this time, we're going to ask permission to admit Stage Proposed 2.
No objection.
May I have permission to publish? Thank you so much. Publishing Stage 2.
Publishing means publishing it to
So-
the jury, making it so the jury can also
You
see it.
mentioned that on that morning, you noticed that his garage was up.
It was closer to noon
Okay.
because I was running errands that morning. I drop off at school, and then I had errands, and I was home around noon.
And-
Or before, a little before that.
And you mentioned you've lived next to this guy for how long? How many
Across the street, 27 years, almost 30.
years? And does he keep kind of a regular routine?
Yes,
And so this really stuck out to you?
yes, because I'm in and out of the house all day long, so I'm familiar with, it's not that big of a street, not to
Alright,
me. But I
okay.
was his because,
Okay, so it's up around noon. Do you do anything in relation to Jeff to let him know about the garage?
no, but I was busy, and
Okay.
but I had that feeling of angst, like something was wrong.
Okay, so a little more time goes by.
Right.
Do you see that house a little bit later in the day?
All day, up until I left to leave at 2:30.
So at 2:30, is the garage still up?
Yes,
Do you decide to do anything at that point?
I would, Did it when I came home.
Okay, when'd you come home?
It was around anywhere between 3:30 and 4.
Okay, so now.
And so I started, I believe it was texting, or I was texting him.
So you're texting him. Is the car in the garage? Is Jeff's car in the garage?
Yes.
All right. So now you're texting around 3:30, something like that. Do you
Yeah.
get any response back?
No.
So what do you do at that point?
So I'm really busy, so I just continued on. I spoke with my neighbor. She told me, it's strange. I said, I know I already called him or texted him. I can't remember what it was.
Do
And
you remember which neighbor it was?
her name is Debbie.
Okay. So you're now asking Debbie too. How long has Debbie lived in the neighborhood with you guys?
I'm not sure, but maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're noticing it. Debbie's noticing it. It's 3:30.
It's basically her and I, because
Okay.
I'm super observant.
Okay.
And so, and
Okay.
she is too, but she works from home, so she's busy herself, but I'm in and out all day long.
Evening comes, any change with that garage door?
No, we were gonna go, we spoke about it, my husband and he said if it's still open when it gets dark, we'll just go over there and close it.
Is that what you do that night?
Yes,
Who does that?
my husband and I walk over there, and I pulled the cord,
All right, so you pull the cord, you bring it down.
and he pulled the garage door down.
All right, so the garage door is pulled down. Do you do anything to alert Jeff to let him know what you did for him?
It was either directly before or directly after. I think it was directly before. I sent him an email. It was either an email or a text. And I said, okay, this is what I think it was before. I said, this is what we're gonna do. I haven't heard from you, so I'm assuming maybe we think you left town and you don't have your phone or something. I said, but your garage door's up, and I hope you're not mad, but we're gonna go over there and close your garage door for you.
All right. Do you hear anything from him by the end of the night?
No.
Following morning, what
No.
happens? Following morning, what happens?
My husband woke me up early,
Okay, what happens then?
and he asked me if I called 311.
Okay, to do what? Why did you want to call 311 at that point?
For a well check.
Right? Do you do it at that point?
I said, let me email him one more time. And then he said, well, I'll go check the backyard. I said, I said, why don't you go check the backyard? He said, that's a good idea.
Is there a way from the cul-de-sac, if you're approaching Jeff's house, is there a way to kind of check that backyard?
To the left, as I'm looking at it.
So when we're looking in this picture, there are some individuals, there's some men standing to the left of that house. Is that the general area that you're talking about, that you could get to the backyard?
I believe so. I've never walked back in his backyard from
Okay.
that direction.
But that's what you were thinking your husband was gonna go walk.
Right, and he said, that's a good idea, and then that's
Okay.
what he did, and
And then what happened next?
then she came running in the house sobbing and screaming. And I said, what's going on? What happened? And I ran out there to my husband, and he was on the phone with 911. And he was in shock, and I went into shock. And he was having a hard time
Your husband was.
getting to the 911 operator to understand him.
Okay. What happens after, does your husband eventually get on the phone with 911?
He just kept saying, we know he's dead. What, he didn't say, we know he's dead. I heard him being very, to a point of arguing because, just get the police over here. And she wanted to know, well, is he breathing? Questions about how do you know he's dead? And he said, what is taking so long, or something to that effect? Why can't you just get the police over here? I know he's dead.
And you could see your husband was upset.
Very upset, because, he has a bit of an accent and nobody can ever understand him on the phone, plus it's above 115 degrees. It was a super hot day, very hot.
Okay. Did you go over to that side of the house?
Yes, I went up to my husband and then I saw him.
Okay, and when you say him, who are you talking?
Jeff,
Okay. After that, do the police or medical personnel eventually arrive?
yes, but one policeman was walking up the block.
Okay.
And I just felt like it was, I was in shock, but it just seemed like everything was in slow motion because he was walking very slowly and I kind of said, would you please hurry up?
Okay.
And he says, do you have a medical emergency? I said, no, it's not a medical emergency. I said, you can see.
Okay. And you directed him over to Jeff?
And then I saw a fire truck at the end of the cul-de-sac, but they wouldn't come up.
Okay.
Nobody came up the block.
All right. Did you remain outside and kind of watch as?
Yes, I was praying over him, talking to him.
Okay. And so it was you there kind of just praying for Jeff?
I was, because I just didn't seem, it was just very not natural.
Okay. And you didn't?
And it just couldn't didn't look like a natural death, I could tell you that right now.
As time goes on, do more emergency personnel and police arrive to the scene?
Of course.
Okay. And do you stay out there generally and kind of watch what's happening?
Yes, I just stayed, I just didn't, I stayed across the street. My gate, my side gate would look directly on him.
Okay. And so you
But
watched?
through a semi-sheer bush,
Okay. And so you watched them kind of set up, crime scene tape with this, that, and the other?
Correct.
And you stayed out there. Court's indulgence? Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
I have no questions for this witness. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today.
We didn't get much out of this particular witness. She was the one, her husband was the one to find the body of the decedent. She is the one who sent some emails regarding the fact that the garage was up. I would expect that the next witness is likely going to be her husband, as far as where he found the body, how he found the body, things of that nature. But it looks to me like they are trying to get the jury into a state of where they have sympathy for someone, the victim, the victim's neighbors, things of that nature, so that then they can get into, once they evoke the sympathy, then they can press hard on, now find this guy guilty. So we'll see if that's what their tactic here is.
You may step down and you're excused from your subpoena. You may call your next witness.
Next witness, Your Honor, is Roy Bailey.
This is going to be the husband, Roy Bailey. The first witness was Holly Bailey.
Design, develop, scale, repeat. Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises.
Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Roy, R-O-W, Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Good afternoon, sir. In September of 2022, what street were you living on?
Bruns, Circle.
Bronze Circle? Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you lived in that neighborhood?
I'd say 40 years.
40 years? Did you have a neighbor by the name of Jeff Gehrman?
Oh, yes.
Where did he live in relation to your house?
Directly across the street.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to put on the overhead what's been admitted as states 2.
She's got a delay.
Oh, there we go. Can you see that on your screen in front of you?
Yes.
Do you recognize that residence?
Yes, I do.
Whose house is that?
That is Jeff's house.
Okay, and you said you've been in the neighborhood about 40 years. Do you have an estimate of how long he lived there?
Yes, 26 years.
26 years?
Mhm.
Over the years or decades there, did you kind of get familiar with when he would come and go from his house?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
How would you describe his daily routine?
Excuse me. He would, in the mornings, I was working outside my house, and Jeff would come out around 8 o'clock or something, and I assumed he went and got his coffee or whatever and came back, and a lot of times, he would acknowledge me, I'd acknowledge him.
So he had kind of a routine of going to get coffee in the morning,
Yeah, quite
and then
often.
you'd see him when he'd come back?
Yes, absolutely.
On the 2nd of September of 2022, did you notice something strange at his house?
At his house,
Yeah, or how his house looked, I guess.
this was on the Friday, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I noticed the garage door was open.
Could you tell whether or not his car was there?
No,
Okay.
no, I couldn't see that low.
Okay. Was it unusual for him to have his garage door open?
Yes, he would come and go, but always close it.
Because you saw that, did you take note of it throughout the day?
Yes,
Did you have any discussions with your wife about the garage door?
yes.
And do you ever walk over there on the 2nd?
Not early because of the heat.
Okay. How about later in the day?
Yes, I did go over there.
And when you went over there, did you go by yourself that evening, I guess it would be, or with anyone?
No, with my wife.
You went over with your wife?
Yes,
At that time when you went over, do you remember if his car was there or not?
yes, it was there.
It was there. Did that strike you as unusual?
No,
Okay. Did you and your wife do anything to the house when you went over that evening?
close the door.
Were you aware of whether or not your wife had attempted to contact Jeff during the day?
Yes, throughout the day.
And to your knowledge, was contact ever made?
No.
I want to talk to you about the next day, the 3rd of September. Did you go over to Jeff's house that day?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember about what time you went over?
Around 9:15 in the morning.
Okay. And I assume you just walked over yourself?
Well, my granddaughter
Oh, your
was behind.
Okay, so she kind of was following behind you?
Yes.
Is that, yes? When you, looking at this picture, did you go, like, I know the garage door would have been shut, but did you go to his front door, or where did you walk?
I went to his front door.
And is that towards the, kind of the?
To the right,
Yeah, where the
correct.
trees are?
Yes.
Okay. And did you knock on the door?
I knocked and rang the doorbell.
And any response?
No.
Okay, what happened after you did that?
After I did that, I thought about going around, I was going to go around the back to see, if there was something up that way. And, I did go around the corner, around the garage.
And so did you head from looking at from the tree area across the garage here?
Once I turned the corner, I could see across.
Okay, but did you walk over to that other side?
I walked over to the other side.
And what did you see there?
When I made the right turn, I walked about another 6 feet or so and saw. Sorry.
It's okay, do you need any water, or
I saw Jeff.
you saw Jeff? Was he on the ground?
Yes, he was.
Okay, so you saw him, and based on that, what did you do?
I called 911.
Did you have your cell phone with you?
Yes,
Okay, were you standing there calling?
yes.
Okay, And then at some point after you called 911, did police and other people arrive at the residence?
Yes, there was a patrol officer that came by
Okay.
within a very short time, actually.
So the patrol guy comes first, and then were there a lot more people that came to the
That
house?
followed, yes.
Do you remember if you were interviewed by officers about what you saw?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay. And how about, did officers ask you about whether or not you had a video surveillance system on your house?
Yes, they did.
Did they ask for permission to download that from you?
Yes, they did.
And I assume you gave permission?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Bailey. When you were interviewed, was it a formal interview where you went into the police department, a detective's office to give an interview?
No, they were in the house. I mean, the detectives were around all day. And
Okay. So it was just when they arrived on the scene, is that the interview that you were referring to?
Yes,
Do you know if they recorded your interview or not?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down and you are excused.
So from this witness, we got that he did give the police the permission to download the ring cam footage. We have the placement of the body. And so from these two witnesses, we've gotten one piece of evidence and just establishing that Mr. Gehrman was in fact found outside of his home, deceased. We didn't really get much else. But the ring cam footage is going to have to be entered into evidence at some point. And so we did have to get essentially their statement that they did give the police the right to download that ring cam footage, so that when the prosecution attempts to enter that into evidence, there are no hiccups there. But other than that, we didn't really get much from these two witnesses.
Your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here. You may call your next witness.
We'll call Deborah Ryan.
The witnesses are all sequestered outside of the courtroom so that they don't hear each other's testimony. So right now, the bailiff or someone else, some other court official is going out into the hall to call each witness in. So we heard kind of in the background somebody calling for Deborah Ryan to come into the courtroom. And that's why it takes a little bit of time for each witness to get on the stand.
I swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Debbie, Debbie, Ryan, Ryan.
Thank you. May I proceed? Thank you. Ms. Ryan, if you could, do you know someone by the name of Jeff Garrett?
I do.
Okay. What was your relationship to him? How'd you know Jeff?
Neighbors, or lives right across the street from me for 27 or 28 years.
All right. What was the street that you and Jeff lived on?
Bronze Circle.
Okay. Do you know a couple by the name of Roy and Holly Bailey?
I do.
And how do you know Roy and Holly?
Been our neighbors since we've lived there for 33 years, right beside us.
Okay, so I want to show you what's been already admitted to stage 2. You look at that monitor over the, well, you can look at the monitor even just to your right, that
okay.
helps. Or you can look at the big one behind
No,
you.
this is better.
Is that better? Okay. Do you recognize what you're looking at there?
Yes.
Whose house is that?
Jeff's.
All right, so I just want to orient the jury for a minute. So Jeff lives there. Where do the Baileys live in relation to Jeff?
Straight across the street.
Okay, is that in a cul-de-sac?
We're in a cul-de-sac.
All right, and if we're at the Bailey's house, all right, if we're in the Bailey's house, do you live to the left of the Bailey's house, or you live to the right?
To the right.
Okay, so you live right next door to the right, so you're also facing Jeff.
Yes.
All right. So I want to turn your attention to September 2nd of 2022. On that day, do you notice something in relation to Jeff's home that catches your attention?
I did. The garage door was open,
Okay. Why did that, of all things, catch your attention?
because unless he's outside, was working on the lawn or something, it was always closed.
Okay, so
It's always closed.
so you look over, garage is open, but Jeff's not there.
I didn't notice him, no.
Okay, was his car there?
Yes.
All right. So around what time do you remember roughly?
I'm gonna say 11:30, 12.
Okay, sometime in the afternoon, right, or
Yes.
midday, yeah. So, do you do anything at that point, or do you just kind of go about your business?
I didn't. I thought maybe he was working on the side of the house or something. I was getting lunch. I work remote. Went back to work.
So you go back to work. A little later in the day, is that garage door still open?
It is.
Do you notice it at that point? Are you concerned at that point?
I was a little, because I wondered why it was still open. I left to go get groceries, so I walked over and knocked on the front door, rang the doorbell.
And so when you knocked on the door, did you notice anything? Did you notice like any signs of like someone breaking in or anything like that?
No, I did not.
So you knock on the door, get an answer?
No, I didn't.
Ring the doorbell, get an answer?
No, I didn't.
All right, so what do you do at that point?
Walked back and went and got groceries. I thought maybe he was showering. I don't know. I just walked back to the house.
All right, so you go about your day. Let's take at some point in the evening, do you kind of notice or check on the door or see what's going on?
We did, my husband came home, we went to get something to eat, it was still open. When we came back, it was still open, so I called Roy and Holly to see if they knew, where he was at. It was unusual.
When you spoke with them, did they share a similar concern
They
as you
did.
did? Okay,
Yes.
so what do you decide to do at that point?
We walked over, Roy pulled the cord in the garage so that the door would go down. At least we knew it was shut. We thought maybe, I don't know, he'd left on vacation or something and the door open.
Okay, do you hear from Jeff that night at all?
No.
All right, so let's get to the following morning. Let's talk about September 3rd. That morning, what are you doing that day, or what were you planning on doing?
We left for a ball game.
Okay.
We were at the ball game, and I'm not sure what time it was. I'll say 9:30 or so. I don't know. It was in the morning. We'd just gotten to the game, and I got a call from Holly.
All right.
Very.
Tell me before we get into what she said.
Oh,
what
okay,
is
sorry.
what is her demeanor like when you get on the phone? How does she sound?
I can't even understand her. She's screaming, crying.
Okay, and what does she tell you?
That Jeff's dead.
Okay.
Roy had found him, so we left immediately and went home.
Okay. When you get home, when you pull up through Brown Circle, what do you see?
There are already cops starting to be there, but it wasn't closed off yet, so we were able to go into our house.
Okay, so you're able to make it to your home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you watch from your home? Do you come outside and just kind of watch as things unfold? What do you remember?
We're outside
Okay.
watching.
Does it? I mean, I know you're not a police officer,
No.
but does everything seem kind of normal for the most part? Does anything look out of the ordinary as police or paramedics or people are responding to the scene?
No, I mean, I don't know what, how
Okay.
to word, yeah, no,
Nothing stood out to you?
no,
Okay. And you stay out there for a while and watch?
yes.
Okay. And nothing, during the whole time you're out there, nothing catches your attention as being out of the ordinary?
No.
Okay. Did the police eventually speak to you at some point?
Came by, yeah,
Was it that day?
yeah.
And where did you give your interview at?
They, just right in front of the house, they were asking a couple questions, but they still were not really saying anything, obviously. They were trying to figure out what's going on.
And you in general just relayed kind
Yeah.
of some of the things you just shared with us
No,
today?
yeah, that we didn't know.
All right, well, listen, thank you so much. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Just briefly, thank you, Ms. Ryan. When you were interviewed, was it by patrol officers, detectives?
It wasn't really an interview. They were just kind of in the neighborhood, going around, trying to calm people, I think, more than anything. They weren't asking a lot of questions.
Okay, but you did come in contact with officers. Were they uniformed?
Yes,
Okay. Are you aware if they recorded your conversation with them?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
You can redirect?
Oh, no, you're on.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down, you are excused.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. You may call.
So the defense is honing in on whether or not the police recorded these interviews with the neighbors. And it's at some point we may find out why he's so interested in that. We did learn during opening statements that perhaps the police destroyed some body camera footage. Uh, Perhaps they destroyed the interview tapes, but the interview tapes, I can't imagine what questions they would have asked or answers they would have received uh, from the people who found the body that would shed light on who actually committed the crime. So I'm wondering why he's asking those questions. But like the other two neighbors, we didn't get much out of this witness. We did get that there was no forced entry when she went to the house the day of the murder.
Call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Claire Browning.
Can you please step up from the witness stand? Remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Claire Browning. First name is Claire.
Police officers typically show up to court in their uniforms,
Where are you employed?
I'm a senior crime scene analyst with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police.
and that is because jurors typically find people in uniform to be more credible. So typically the prosecution or the defense, whoever is calling the police officer as a witness, will ask that they show up in their uniform.
Police Department.
How long have you worked as a crime scene analyst?
A little over 9 years now.
Okay. And you said you're a senior crime scene analyst?
I am.
Can you explain to the members of the jury first what a crime scene analyst does?
The duties of a crime scene analyst are to respond to crime scenes once we've been requested. We document the scene through notes, photography, a diagram if necessary, process for any latent prints, and collecting the evidence as it pertains to the crime.
And do you undergo training with Metro before you're allowed to work as a crime scene analyst?
Yes, we do.
And can you just give us an overview of that?
We go through a 12-week crime scene analyst academy, as well as a 12-week field training evaluation program, and we do continuing education classes after that.
And you mentioned that you're a senior crime scene analyst. Is there some testing or proficiency requirement or I guess experience that allows you to have that designation?
Yes.
So this is going to be one of the prosecution's expert witnesses. That's what it sounds like. This crime scene analyst, the prosecution is asking this crime scene analyst questions in order to establish that she is qualified to give the expert testimony that she's about to give. If she doesn't ask the appropriate questions and get the correct responses out of the crime scene analyst, then the defense attorney is going to object and say, this person is not qualified to give these opinions. If that is the case, the defense has likely already done that. They're just going to be doing it again for the purposes of trial so that they can preserve the objection for a possible appeal.
And can you describe what that is for the jury?
We go through a testing process to promote to senior crime scene analyst. Once we are a senior, we are able to handle more complex calls to include homicides, officer-involved shootings, things of that nature. We also are responsible for training newer crime scene analysts and being an acting supervisor.
And you were working as a crime scene analyst on September the 3rd of 22?
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to respond to 7216 Bronze Circle?
That's correct.
What type of location is that?
It's a residential neighborhood.
Were you the only crime scene analyst that responded?
No, I was not. Senior crime scene analyst Christy Thomas also responded, and a crime scene analyst supervisor, Kaylin King, responded.
Now, when crime scene analysts arrive at a scene that's a possible homicide, I assume there's detectives and patrol officers there as well?
That's correct.
What kind of happens when you first get there?
When we first arrive on scene, we typically get a scene briefing, kind of the logistics of the scene, what we have, what items of evidence there potentially might be. We get that.
She's either very used to testifying before a jury or she has been adequately prepped. If you notice, she is looking at the jury and not having she's not having a conversation with the prosecutor. She's having a conversation with the jury. She's talking to the jury. The jury like juries typically like it when the witness makes eye contact with them. It helps them determine whether or not the witnesses are credible. And so when you have a credible witness, you want them to make eye contact with the jury.
That from a patrol officer, and then we kind of meet as a team to kind of determine how we're going to go about analyzing the scene.
And when you say you meet as a team, is that yourself and detectives?
That's correct.
Oh, and other crime scene analysts, I should say?
That's
Do you all like kind of take an overview of the scene before people get down into the work of it?
Yes, we typically do a walkthrough of the scene to kind of determine what's going to be important for us.
How are the duties divided amongst the analysts?
It can vary from scene to scene, but typically, and especially on the scene, we divided it so that one crime scene analyst was doing the report and the photos, which was myself, and another crime scene analyst typically does the evidence and the diagram, which was Christy Thomas in this case.
And, but all of you are sort of familiar with the scene because you're working it together?
Yes, we work in tandem.
Okay. And you were the photographer?
I was.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? And I don't know if Mr. Horvath and Mr. Delswitz, do you want to? Okay. Your Honor, just for the record, defense counsel has reviewed all these photos that I'm going to show her, the witness. Okay. I'm going to ask you just to look through these in groups, and this is states proposed 1 through 51. If you can just let me know if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, I recognize these.
Are they a fair and accurate depiction, with the exception of one, state's proposed one, of how the scene appeared on September the 3rd?
Yes, they are.
State moves to admit, I think 2 is already admitted, which is, so 2, or I guess 3 through 51.
No objection.
And with respect to state's proposed 1, does that appear to be like a Google image of the house?
Yes.
State moves to admit 1.
No objection.
Thank you. The next series I'd like you to look at are states proposed 52 to 105. If you could have a look at those.
Recognize these as well.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of sort of the inside of Mr. Garman's house?
Yes.
State moves to admit 52 to 105.
No objection.
They're admitted.
Next group is 53 to 134.
On this action, we go to witnesses.
Sure, go ahead.
Recognize these.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the outside and backyard area of Mr. Garman's house?
Yes.
State moves to admit 106 through 134.
No objection.
They're admitted.
Next group is 135 through 148. There's just one more after that.
Recognize those?
Those appear to be the garage area and Mr. Garman's vehicle.
Yes.
State moves to admit 135 through 148.
We have no objection.
They're admitted.
And the last group is state's proposed 149 through 161, if you could go through those.
Recognize those as well.
Okay. And for the record, state's proposed 149 is a diagram of the crime scene, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the remaining up to 161 are photographs that were taken on the 3rd?
Yes.
Fair and accurate representation of how they appeared with some of the crime scene analyst markers on them?
Yes.
State moves to admit 149 to 161.
We have no objection.
They're admitted.
May I publish these, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. So we're going to start with what's been admitted as States 1. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the front of the residence with a Google Street View.
Okay. And this is what's been admitted as States 2. And
The-
what are we looking at in that one?
This is the front of the residence on September 3rd.
Okay. Now, as we see it here, it looks like there's some crime scene tape on there. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Who puts the crime scene tape up?
It's usually going to be the first responding officers.
Okay. And that was in place by the time you got there?
That's correct.
I'm going to put on the overhead States 5. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the west side yard of that same residence.
Okay. And this is States 7. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is, again, the west side yard of that same residence. The gate in the back leads to the backyard, and in front of that gate, you can see the decedent.
Okay. That gate that we see in the backyard, did that have locks on it, or was it closed or anything?
No, there were gates on both the east and west sides of the house, and neither of them had a lock.
Okay. I'm now putting on the overhead,
been admitted as states 10. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is a photograph of the decedent.
And when you and other crime scene analysts are noting, or I guess documenting the crime scene, is there any movement of the decedent before you take the photographs, or do you want to keep the scene as it was, and in your photography, I guess I should say?
Ideally, we keep the scene as pristine as we can. My photographs were actually taken after initial photographs of another CSA. They had already done an initial cursory body examination, and during that time, they discovered that the circumstances of his death were suspicious, so a homicide was called out.
Was there thinking at one point that it might have been a medical incident?
There was.
Okay, and then after that kind of was dispelled, then homicide and yourself respond?
That's correct.
Now, in terms of the decedent, was there an attempt to document any personal property that he had on his person?
Yes, there was.
And what did he have with him?
Inside the left front pocket of the shorts that he was wearing, he had a cell phone. Protruding from the left rear pocket of those same shorts was a wallet with cards and identification in the name Jeffrey Gehrman, as well as several US dollar bills in cash. And then in his right front pocket, there was a car key.
So I'm putting on the overhead states 40. Is that the cell phone that you just spoke of?
Yes, it is.
And this is states 41. What is that?
This is the car key.
And I think you mentioned a wallet as well?
That's correct.
Okay. This is states 43. That's his wallet?
That's correct.
Was there photography done on the inside of his wallet to see if there was any cash present?
Yes, there was.
This is states 46. And that was documented as well?
Yes.
Probably, do you know how much money he had on him, or?
I can't recall.
Okay.
The evidence was booked by crime scene analyst Christy Thomas.
Okay, but it didn't appear like there was money taken from his wallet because it's present.
It did not appear so.
And this is states 47. That would be his identification.
That's correct.
Now, the areas surrounding the body, did yourself and other crime scene analysts take note of the condition of those bushes and kind of shrubs?
Yes.
And what were your observations about them?
The bushes that were closest to the decedent had several broken branches. There was also apparent blood on those branches, and the rocks appeared to be disturbed around those bushes.
And putting on the overhead states 51. Is that an example of that?
Yes, it is.
And this is states 50. Sort of another view of the bushes with blood.
Yes.
You said the rocks around him were disturbed as well?
Yes.
Now, when you're dealing with the decedent's body, are there attempts made to preserve evidence in the form of DNA that might be on his person?
Yes.
And what is that?
We typically, whenever we are recovering a body from a scene, we're going to place handbags over their hands so we can preserve any kind of DNA evidence that might be on their hands or under the nails, whatever the case may be. We also wrap them in a clean sheet to preserve any trace evidence that might be on them.
I'm putting on the overhead states 37. What is that?
This is a representation of one of the bags that we put on his hand.
And this is states 36. That would be the other one, I think.
Yes.
And again, you said that's to preserve like DNA evidence?
That's correct.
Did yourself, detectives and crime scene analysts go into Mr. Gehrman's residence as well?
Yes, we did.
When you went into the residence, I guess I should say, what way did you make entry? Through the sort of the garage door that leads into the house or the front door?
I
or-
believe we made entry through the interior garage door.
Okay. Did you do any documentation of the front door to note its condition?
Yes,
Was there any damage to the front door?
there was no damage to the front door.
Okay, I'm putting on the overhead states 52. Is that the front door?
Yes, it is.
And the photograph is to document that it hasn't been kicked in or there's no damage to the frame?
That's correct.
How about the interior of the residence? How would you describe it?
The interior of the residence was actually very clean, very orderly. Everything was essentially in its place.
Have you been to residences where places have been ransacked or items have been taken?
Yes, I have.
Did this residence look like that at all?
No, it did not.
Did it look like there was any area of disturbance inside the residence?
No.
This is states 53. What part of the house is that?
This is the living room.
And again, no disturbance and his TV's present, everything looks pretty much in order?
Yes.
This is states 54. Is that just another view of the living room?
Yes, it is.
This is states 59. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the bedroom inside the residence.
And again, no sign of disturbance.
That's correct.
This is state 60. And we're looking at,
This is another view of the bedroom.
okay. I'm putting on the overhead now, state 64. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is like a sitting room that was just off of the living room.
No sign of disturbance in that room?
No.
This is state 66. And what room is that?
This is the office.
This is state 68. Appears to be sort of a closer view of his computer.
Yes.
Any sign of disturbance that you saw in that office area?
No.
Did you note the condition of like closets and cupboards to document whether or not there was any disturbance in those areas as well?
Yes, I did.
This is state 71. No disturbance in that closet, it appears.
That's correct.
And this is state 74. Sort of a cupboard, no disturbance.
That's correct.
And was it like that throughout the house? There was no sign of disturbance anywhere on the inside?
Correct.
Did Mr. Gehrman have medication that appeared undisturbed as well?
Yes, he did.
I want to move to, this is states 81, you can tell me. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the dining room area inside the residence.
Okay, and this is states 83. That dining room area to the right of it is a kitchen?
Yes.
And I see like a butcher block on the counter there. Did you document whether any knives were missing or anything like that?
There were no knives missing from the block.
Okay. This is states 89. What are we looking at there?
This is another view of the other side of the kitchen.
Okay, no sign of disturbance.
No sign of disturbance.
And this is states 91.
This is again another view of the kitchen.
And again, no indication of disturbance.
No disturbance.
I'm showing you now states 100. It appears to be a trash bag. What was done with that?
This trash bag was located on the floor in between that dining room area and the kitchen. It was just open on the floor like that. We went through it and looked for any kind of receipts to kind of determine a timeline.
And I'm putting on the overhead now, states 103. What is that?
This is a receipt from Roberto's,
Okay.
dated 9/2, I believe at 9:03 a.m.
Okay, and the date would be on the receipt here. Let me zoom in. Can you see it? Oh, I know. Mhm. So we see the receipt from 9/2?
That's correct.
Okay. And the other part of the receipt has the time at 9:03 a.m.?
Yes.
How about the, sort of the exterior of all of Mr. Gehrman's house? Was that documented by crime scene analysts as well?
Yes, it was.
And what was the purpose of that?
Just a document to see if there were any kind of disturbances or any way that somebody might have made entry into the residence.
This is states 106. Let me back up. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the west side gate that is just behind the decedent.
Okay, and that gate is closed, but there's not locks on it?
That's correct.
Was there any sign of disturbance around sort of the perimeter of the house?
There wasn't much of a disturbance. As you can see in that last photo, the gate is not latched all the way. So the door is closed, but it's not latched. Also, there's a window just north of that gate, so on the other side of the gate in the backyard. That window had a slash through the screen.
Okay, I'm putting on the overhead states 111. Can we see the window that you're talking about in that photograph? It's probably, can you see it or no?
I don't believe so. It's actually just beyond that bush on the left.
Okay, I'll try this one. This is states 113. Can you see looking at 113, can you see the slash mark on the window?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the linear line.
Can you, there's a mouse up there? Yeah,
I believe that this is the slash.
okay. I'm gonna approach just so you're sure.
Yes, that appears to be so.
Okay. Did you take a closer look at that slash, or is there any further description you can give of it
There's just a tear in the
in the screen? Okay. This is states 114. It might be a better picture of it. Is that the slash that you were talking about?
That's correct.
Any other disturbance though on the window, like on the inside of that corresponding room, broken glass, anything pushed out?
No, not that we noticed.
Okay. And as you continue to the back of the residence, any disturbance whatsoever?
Not that I recall.
Okay, this is states 117. That appear to be the back of the residence?
Yes.
And then the back door that leads, I assume, into the kitchen area, no, that wasn't broken or any sign of disturbance to that as well?
No.
Mr. Gehrman's car was present at the scene?
Yes, it was.
This is states 135. And the keys were in his pocket, right?
That's correct. One key was in his pocket and one key was actually in the bedroom closet.
In the bedroom closet. The car itself, was it disturbed? Did you look at it on the inside?
We did open up the car. It was very clean on the inside.
Clean on the inside, nothing appeared out of the ordinary?
That's correct.
So the scene appears to be kind of confined to that side yard area.
Yes.
I'm gonna put on the overhead states 149. What are we looking at in this exhibit?
This is a diagram of the crime scene.
Okay. Now, on this diagram, I see AB6, AB5, 15, AB4, and AB3, 2, and 1. What are those designations?
The AB 1 through, I believe it's 6, is apparent blood. So apparent blood stain 1 through 6. They're in different locations around the body. Number 15 is actually a broken branch that we located near the body that also had apparent blood on it.
Were swabs taken of these areas?
Yes.
And how do you guys do that at a scene?
Whenever we take swabs of apparent blood, especially in this case, AB1 and AB2 are actually going to just be the physical surface that the blood was on, so that's 2 rocks. 15, like I said, is a branch that had apparent blood on it, so that was booked just as a branch. However, I believe it's AB3 through AB6. We take a cotton swab, so think of it like a Q-tip. We put molecular water on it, which is just essentially clean water. And then we swab the stain and secure it in an envelope and submit it for evidence.
Now, prior to swabbing it, do you mark it on the ground and or on wherever it is and photograph it so you know which one is AB 1, 2, 3, or 4?
That's correct.
I'm putting on the overhead states 150. And can you see the crime scene analyst markers on there?
Yes, you can.
And where should the jury be looking for those?
If you look here on the rocks, this is AB1 and AB2, I believe. The rocks themselves were collected. And then one of the designators is actually right here in the bush on the branch.
Okay. This is states 151. And are you able to see those markers as AB, well, I can read it with my glasses, AB1 and AB2?
Yes, AB1, AB2 are on the ground, AB3 is on the branch.
Okay, and those correspond to where they were on the diagram?
That's correct.
And so this would be AB3, which is on that branch.
Yes.
Now I'm putting on the overhead states 158. Appears to be like a outside decorative butterfly and a bird bath. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And were swabs taken from those items as well?
Yes.
And those would have been impounded the same way that you previously described?
That's correct.
And then are you, as a crime scene analyst, the person who does DNA testing or forensic testing on the item?
No, I do not.
Okay. I think that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Browning, you had testified it was yourself and two other crime scene analysts.
That's correct.
The other two analysts were Thomas and King.
That's correct.
Did all three of you arrive at the address at the same time?
Approximately the same time, yes.
Approximately what time did you arrive?
1441.
Did you arrive in the same vehicle with crime scene analyst Thomas?
I don't believe so. I think we took separate vehicles.
Okay, same question for crime scene analyst King.
I think she also took a separate vehicle.
All right. You arrive at the residence. Who's present when you arrive?
When I arrived, crime scene analyst Janelle Bracken was there initially. She did the initial documentation of the decedent. I believe homicide had already arrived and there were patrol officers as well.
So when you arrived, and you testified that you arrived at presumably the same time that crime scene analyst Thomas and crime scene analyst King arrived, crime scene analyst Bracken was already there.
That's correct.
So now we have 4 crime scene analysts.
Yeah, she responded to the scene initially on a dead body call. After they did their coroner examination, they determined that the circumstances of that death were suspicious. So as it was the end of her shift, swing shift, which is a shift that I work, took over, and she left the scene.
Are you aware of what time crime scene analyst Bracken arrived?
I am not sure what time she arrived.
When you arrived, you testified that homicide was there. You're referring to homicide detail?
Homicide detectives, that's correct.
And who was the principal detective, if you knew, of this crime scene investigation based upon your arrival and your understanding?
I believe the detectives that were the lead agents on the case were Detective Gaddis and Hawkins.
Gaddis and Hawkins.
That's correct.
And they belong basically to the homicide group or the homicide detail, fair to say?
That's correct.
How many detectives in total were present when you arrived?
I can't recall.
Fair to say there was a lot of people coming in and out?
There were,
Law enforcement.
yes, there were a lot of law enforcement on scene.
How many patrol officers were on scene, if you're aware?
I can't recall.
Are you aware of any Metro Intelligence officers that were present?
I don't recall that.
Okay. There may have been, you just don't recall.
That's correct.
Now, your responsibilities were primarily that of taking photos and generating a report in reference to those photos, fair to say? As well as the evidence diagram that we've reviewed with you, that's States Exhibit 149, correct?
CSA Thomas was the one that impounded the evidence and generated the diagram.
Okay. So your primary responsibility was that of photographing?
That's correct.
We were shown photographs in States Exhibit 36 of the hands. Do you recall those?
That's correct, yeah.
You didn't place basically the covering on the hands, correct?
I can't recall which of us put the handbags over the
Okay.
hand.
So you may have put the handbags on the hands?
Typically, it'll be the crime scene analyst who is doing the evidence recovery will do that, but I can't recall.
Okay, and who would have that person been?
That would have been CSA Thomas.
But you don't know if it was CSA Thomas or yourself, correct, to put those bags on?
I can't recall.
And fair to say, when you arrived, there were no bags on the hands, correct?
Correct.
And you don't know how long those hands were exposed prior to your arrival?
Correct.
You had given testimony concerning this knife block inside Mr. Gehrman's residence,
Yes.
and you had testified that no knives were missing from that particular block, correct? Did you, and this block was in the kitchen area,
Yes, it was.
did you open and review the drawers contained within, inside the kitchen?
Not that I recall.
Didn't photograph the contents?
No.
Didn't know what was in there before your arrival, a week before, or following your departure, correct?
No.
Did you take any measurements of the distance between the kitchen area to the scene where the photographs were taken of the blood and the other matters?
No, we did not.
You were asked to give testimony concerning the slash. It was States Exhibit 113. And you characterize that as a slash, correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry? You probably, I don't want to mess up your stack. I have 113, but actually I have it. Thank you very much. Can you see it? There's a delay. This is the slash that was referred to, correct? On that
Yes.
window? And that was on the other side of the gate where Mr. Gehrman was found, correct?
Correct.
And then a close-up of this slash is in Exhibit 115, correct?
Yes.
Now, you use the word slash, but you don't know whether or not that was slashed by a knife or was even cut, correct?
No, it's a defect.
A defect. So, I mean, the idea of slash, that's something that doesn't necessarily fit that photograph, does it?
It could potentially, but it is a defect in the screen.
It could have been a fray.
It could have been.
And are you aware of what level, what height this slash or this fray was from the ground?
I don't recall.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Can you direct?
Ms. Browning, when crime scene analysts are working scenes, it looks like you're on duty now, right? Is that what you would wear?
Yes.
Do you wear gloves?
Yes, we do.
What's the purpose of crime scene analysts wearing gloves?
It's to prevent any contamination or cross-contamination of the scene.
Okay, and do all crime scene analysts at murder scenes wear gloves in order to avoid that contamination?
Yes, we do. We actually double glove anytime that DNA is a concern.
Okay, and so whoever bagged the hands of Mr. Gehrman would have been double gloved?
That's correct.
Okay. When you got to the scene, I think you, we talked about there being crime scene tape up.
That's correct.
Okay. What's the purpose of the tape?
The tape is to keep any non-law enforcement personnel out of the scene.
When you've been at murder scenes in your work at Metro, in a murder scene, if you're law enforcement, is everybody allowed to go in the scene where the decedent is?
No.
What are the rules on that?
Typically, it's going to be people that are actively investigating the scene.
Okay, so anyone who happens to be standing around can't go into the scene?
Correct.
And are there steps taken by patrol officers, analysts, and detectives, everybody, to preserve scenes?
Yes.
And that's in order to preserve any possible evidence that might be present?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone cross?
Yes, and follow up. You were part of a second group that arrived. There was a crime scene analyst, Bracken, who had arrived prior to you, correct?
Correct.
Initially, this wasn't treated as a homicide scene, was it?
Not initially.
So these concerns regarding preserving evidence and contamination obviously would have followed, fair to say?
Anytime that a decedent is on scene, we do our best to lock down the scene. We have patrol officers on scene. We put tape up. We take all the precautions as necessary.
But you weren't present. were
I
you?
was not present for that.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No other questions, Ray?
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down. You are excused from your subpoena. Thank you for being here. And you may call your next witness. Thanks.
The next witness, Your Honor, is Jamie Idos.
Amy Idos? Please watch your steps as you step up into the witness stand. Remain standing, raise your right hand, face forward, please.
All right. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. Thank you. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Jamie Yos, Jamie, Jamie, last name Yos, IOOS as in Sam.
May I proceed, Your Honor? how are you employed?
I am the Director of the Office of Public Information for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
And what does that mean you do?
I supervise a staff of 10. We are a liaison between the public, the media, and the department. We put together press releases, press conferences. We maintain the department's social media sites as well as the website.
When you say press releases, does that sometimes concern crimes that have just occurred?
Yes, it does.
And are some of those seeking the public's assistance to see if they can identify somebody?
Yes, we do ask for the public's assistance.
Were you working in that capacity in September of 2022?
Yes.
And were you involved in the press releases associated with the Jeff Gehrman homicide?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember, can you tell the members of the jury just generally what type of information or what was released by Metro related to that investigation?
The Public Information Office is not an investigative unit, but when an investigative unit like homicide wants to put out pictures of a crime scene, of evidence, of video they have of a suspect, they'll coordinate with the Public Information Office and we'll either put together a written press release that we release to the media, or sometimes we do press conferences where we release photos and videos of evidence.
And was video evidence released in this case?
Yes, we had video evidence in this case.
Who compiles that, or who decides what's released?
The homicide section, or whatever the investigative section is, decides what they want released, and then they send it to the Public Information Office, and we kind of compile it for them and put it together in a presentation that then we can give to the public.
Okay, I want to play, I think this will be State's Proposed 338. Yes. Okay. Does that image look familiar, or the kind
Yes.
of top part of that? It
Yes.
says man found deceased outside home.
Yep.
What are we looking at there?
We're looking at surveillance video from the neighborhood of where the Gehrman murder occurred that homicide gave to the Public Information Office to release for a press conference on September 6th, 2022.
And there was video, this is sort of a still of the video evidence that was released?
Yes.
Okay, can we just play that? So looking at that video, it appears there's like a normal speed of an individual walking, is that correct?
Correct.
And then a slower version,
Yes.
and then a picture of a car,
Yes.
and then a still? sort
Yes.
of? All of those would have been provided to you by homicide detectives?
Yes.
Metro pushes that information out on September 5th or 6th?
September 5th, we released a photo of the suspect in the case. September 6th, we had a press conference where we released the video, the picture of the car, and again, the still photo of the suspect.
Now, once those are put out by Metro, if someone is calling in and says, I have information, does that go to you?
No, that does not go to our office. If we need a 24/7 response, there's a certain phone number that goes to what we call our Fusion Watch, where we put out their phone number that can get answered at any time if people have tips. We also provide the Crime Stoppers phone number. So if people want to call and report tips anonymously, they can do that. And we also, for that press conference, provided the email for the homicide section in case anyone wanted to email homicide as well.
Okay, and the tips that come in, those are followed up by homicide, not
Yes.
your office?
Right.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. So just so we're clear, you're involved in putting this information, these photographs, these recordings out, but you don't monitor the responses
No.
that are received. Were you involved in the series concerning Bob the burglar, where there was a similarly dressed individual in this area?
Yes.
And when was this Bob the burglar series presented?
Approximately 1 to 2 months before the homicide.
Okay, and you reviewed those videos in preparation for your testimony today?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Nothing else, Your Honor.
Stephanie Smithson.
I'll take that off. Step up into the witness stand. Remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
My first name is Stephanie, Stephanie. Last name is Smithson, Smisen.
Okay, proceed. How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
And what is your job title?
I am a senior crime scene analyst.
We just had a crime scene analyst testify before you. How long have you worked as a crime scene analyst?
Almost 8 years.
And you're a senior crime scene analyst as well?
Yes.
And so that means you're allowed to go to more complicated scenes because of a demonstrated proficiency and experience?
Yes.
When crime scene analysts assist detectives with search warrants, can you describe what your responsibilities are at that type of scene?
Yeah, so generally we'll document the crime scene, and we do that by taking notes, we take photographs, we collect evidence, sometimes we'll process for fingerprints, and then at the end we'll generate a report.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Mr. Dasketchens?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you some photographs. The first one is State's Proposed 217. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And is that the location where you served a search warrant on September 7th with detectives?
Yes.
And then I'd like you to look through this series of photographs, which is State's Proposed 254 through 310. And tell me when you're done with those, please. with respect to 254 to 310, are those a fair and accurate depiction of the location of the search warrant as well as items recovered from the search warrant?
Yes.
State moves to admit those exhibits or those photographs?
There it is.
And then with respect to 217, is that an outside view of the location for the search warrant?
Yes.
State moves to admit 217. Now, as the crime scene analyst on a search warrant, are you searching as well as the detectives?
We generally leave the searching up to the detectives.
Okay, so they search the particular locations, and then where do you guys come in as crime scene analysts?
Once they find an item of interest, they will ask us to go to that location and photograph it, document it, or collect it.
Okay. I'm putting on the overhead what's been admitted as states 217. Do you recognize that location?
Yes.
Is that 9624 Spanish Steps Lane?
Yes.
Did you know whose residence this was?
Yes.
Whose residence is it?
Robert Teller.
Okay, and that's a search warrant was served there on September the 7th with detectives and yourself?
Yes.
You said the detectives typically are doing the searching and you document where various items are found photographically?
Yes.
And then what happens to those items after you document them photographically?
We can collect it and bring it back to the lab for impound or further processing.
Okay. I'm putting on the overhead what's been admitted as states 254. What area of the residence are we looking at in that photograph?
This is the kitchen.
And there appears to be an open drawer on the right side of the dishwasher?
Yes.
What of interest was in that drawer?
There were several items inside of that drawer.
Such as?
Scissors, I believe a knife was in there as well, or a box cutter.
I'm putting on the overhead states 255, sort of a closer view of that drawer. Is that fair?
Yes.
And there, it looks like there's a pair of black scissors, maybe a box cutter, and then some gray scissors?
Yes.
This is states 256. Is that a closer up view of those items?
Yes.
Were those items collected and impounded by you?
Yes.
With respect to those items, did you do anything in terms of further processing them for the presence of blood or DNA type evidence?
Yes, they were all swabbed for possible DNA. The scissors, the gray ones, were swabbed for apparent blood.
For apparent blood. I'm putting on the overhead states 259. Those are the gray scissors.
Yes.
And what is the notation that we see with the AB5, the bright pink?
The pink sticker is just a scaled sticker to show an area of interest, the area that I believe to be apparent blood.
Okay, and those are these are things that you processed yourself?
Correct.
You swapped? Do you recall a pair of shoes or like half a shoe and a whole shoe being collected at that scene?
Yes.
I'm putting on the overhead states 263. Do you recognize that shoe?
Yes.
And was that one of the shoes that were collected at that search warrant?
Yes.
And this is states 268. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is a partial shoe that was also located
Okay.
and recovered.
And were you the person that swabbed the shoe and the partial shoe for possible DNA evidence?
Yes.
I'm putting on the overhead states 274. Is that upside down?
Yes.
All right. What are we looking at there?
These are some multiple pieces of like white, gray, rubber pieces.
And did they appear to be like pieces of a shoe?
They appear to be that way, yes.
Okay. Did you swab those items as well?
There was one that I swabbed.
And why did you swab a particular item?
There was a small area of a reddish brown stain on one of the pieces.
Okay. I'm going to put on the overhead states 275. Zoom in. Do you see the area that you swabbed?
Yes.
And you
don't know where the mouse went.
Okay, well, how about,
Okay.
is that the area?
Yes.
Okay. I'm now putting on the overhead states 277. Let me back out. What are we looking at in that photograph?
This is a Ziploc bag that had more of those rubber pieces that were gray, black, and white in color.
Okay, and did you make some attempt to put some of them together to document what the cut pieces might have been before they were all cut up tiny?
Yes.
This is states 280. And what are we looking at there?
This appears to be the tongue of the shoe that will depict the brand, the size.
So it's like a Nike shoe.
Yes.
I'm now putting on the overhead states 282. What is that photograph?
This is a picture of a Sprouts grocery bag containing multiple pieces of a cut straw hat.
This is states 284. Is that the hat?
Yes.
And this is states 285. It looks like you laid the pieces of the hat out.
Yes.
Did you do any swabs on that Sprouts bag itself?
The bag, yes.
Okay, and what was the purpose of swabbing it?
For possible DNA.
And how about on the pieces of the hat? Did you swab them?
No.
Let me.
What was the result of the swabbing of the outside of the bag?
One second. Were all of the different pieces of the hat impounded?
Yes. Thank you.
And lastly, I'm putting on the overhead states 306. What is that item?
This is a duffel bag.
And was that collected in the search warrant as well?
Yes.
And so you would have photographed that and impounded that as well?
Yes.
If I could have the court's indulgence for just 1 second. Okay, thank you. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Smithson, when you arrived at the residence, what time was it?
At the residence was about 9:30 a.m.
Who else was present when you arrived?
There were homicide detectives, patrol officers were there, personnel from the crime scene analyst section as well.
Okay, how many other crime scene analysts were present?
There was a crime scene analyst supervisor that was present, our director was present, and myself.
So 3 crime scene analysts.
Correct, when I arrived.
Did others arrive prior to your getting there?
Crime scene analyst?
Yes.
No.
So you were the first,
Correct.
and the others arrived after you did.
Correct.
Which detectives? What were the identities of the detectives that were present when you arrived?
There were a handful of detectives that were present. Are you looking for names?
Yes, that's my next
Okay.
question. Yes.
There was Cliff Mogg, Justine Gaddis. I'm blanking on some of the names, but I want to say Edgar Nahum was there. Brittany, I'm forgetting her last name, but there were numerous detectives that were there.
Do you recall the number of males, females?
As far as detectives,
Yes.
I do not know exactly the number, no.
Okay. You generated a report in reference to your involvement in this case,
Yes,
and you didn't include the names of the detectives in your report?
I did include, I just don't know off the top of my head how many.
Okay. Was it only homicide that was there?
No,
Okay. You agree with me that Metro's divided into various details, groups that investigate certain types of crimes, fair to say?
yes,
Generally, there's a principal detective, or basically the one's in charge, and then that person delegates various responsibilities to various people.
yes,
If you recall, who was the primary detective in this case?
It was Detective Justine Gaddis.
Okay. And what other homicide detectives did you interact with in reference to your investigation and collection of evidence in this case?
Her, Cliff Mogg. Again, I'm blanking on names, but may I refer to my report for
Okay,
names?
please.
In his opening statement, the defense attorney talked about a Detective Jaffe and seemed to insinuate that Detective Jaffe is involved in some type of a conspiracy to frame Mr. Tellis for this crime. And so I'm guessing that where he's going with this is that he's trying to get her to put Mr. Jaffe, Detective Jaffe, at the scene of the crime. Detective Jaffe is not a homicide investigator. And so, of course, that calls into question why he was there at the scene of the crime if he was there. So we'll see if she says that.
I apologize. I did not happen to write their names down in my report.
Correct.
I apologize.
So again, we don't know, do we? Because you didn't write it down.
I apologize, yes.
Fair enough. We know homicide was there. There were other detectives from other details, correct?
Yes.
There was Metro Intelligence there, correct?
I'm not completely sure.
You're not sure. So we don't really know who was on this scene where you were collecting evidence and having evidence handed to you, correct?
As far as evidence, only I interacted with homicide that was handling off, so intelligence was not handling off evidence to me.
That you're aware of, but we
That
don't
I
know
know.
for sure, do we? Fair to say?
Yes.
Now, in reference to you reviewing these drawers, was your attention drawn to what to photograph or what to document within?
He's going to come back to that in his closing argument. That statement by her that she doesn't know who interacted with this alleged evidence while this entire crime scene was being investigated. So he's going to essentially likely argue that this evidence was planted prior to her arrival or something like that, and she didn't even take the time to note who was present so that they could investigate the investigators, essentially.
In the kitchen area of this residence?
Yes.
And who was it that directed your attention to those drawers?
I don't remember specifically which detective, to be honest.
Okay.
They were all searching at the same time throughout the residence, and usually were pulled in different directions.
Fair enough. So there's a fair amount of chaos going on, correct?
Yes.
On the pair of scissors, and I believe it states Exhibit 217, there appeared to be what may have been blood on those scissors, correct?
Correct.
And you documented that, you preserved that.
Correct, yes.
And then that went on to another department to analyze, fair to say?
Yes.
In reference to these shoes, you didn't actually find the shoes, but you were directed by another detective to document or to photograph the pieces of the shoes, correct?
Yes.
You don't know who that was, correct?
I believe that was Detective Nahum that directed me for the shoes.
But you agree with me, you're not sure as you sit here today, are you?
I do remember specifically the shoes, yes.
Okay. But there was more than one, correct? There was bags, I mean, there was multiple particles to these shoes, correct?
Yes.
And they were located where in the residence?
There was a couch in one of the living rooms, the northeast living room, and it was underneath the recliner portion of the couch.
But you were directed once these pieces of these shoes were found to that area, correct? You didn't actually find them, did you?
That is correct.
Where were you at when you were summoned to go and find these pieces of these shoes, or to photograph these pictures of these shoes?
I'm in the residence as well with the detectives, catching up on notes.
What room were you in when you were summoned?
I'm not sure exactly which room I was in.
What time were you summoned?
I'm not sure about that as well.
Same questions concerning this hat that was cut up. You were summoned by a detective to come and photograph the hat, correct?
Yes,
That hat was cut up in pieces, correct?
yes.
You don't recall where you were at when you were summoned, do you?
I was somewhere within the residence.
Okay, and how large was this residence?
It was a standard 2-story residence.
How many bedrooms?
There's one downstairs. I believe there was the master bedroom upstairs and 2 children bedrooms upstairs as well.
Did you diagram the residence?
I did not diagram the residence, no.
How many square feet was the residence?
I am not sure.
You arrived at the residence a little after 9 o'clock is your testimony?
Yes.
What time did you leave the residence?
May I refer to my report?
Please.
I left at 7 o'clock at night.
Okay. So
Oh,
what time?
I apologize. I left at 1:18 in the afternoon.
Okay, so you were there for approximately 4 hours.
Yes,
Fair to say you were in multiple rooms, correct?
yes,
Did you ever go into the backyard?
yes,
Side yards?
yes,
Front yards?
yes,
There were times while you were at the residence you would have walked out on the street, correct?
yes,
So you're in and out during this 4-hour period, correct?
yes.
You're not paying attention to who's there, who's not, fair to say?
Might not have noticed everybody that walked through. There's just so many people there.
Exactly, there were so many people, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Yes.
So again, his job is only to create reasonable doubt. So he's doing a good job of essentially laying the groundwork for being able to come back on direct with his witnesses and talk about how evidence could have been planted at the scene, because the scene was, as he stated and she agreed, in a state of chaos, that she did not know who was going in and out of the crime scene or in and out of the home. I'm sorry, not the crime scene. We're talking about Tellus's home. Didn't know who was going in and out of the home because there were so many people there. That she was there for 4 hours and she was going in and out of the house. There obviously she couldn't keep tabs on everything going on. There were only 3 crime scene investigators there, and there were likely an abundance of other people there. Quite a number of police officers show up to conduct a search warrant just so that they can be more efficient and attack separate areas of a dwelling or of a business at the same time. So he's trying to essentially lay the groundwork for his theory that all of this was likely planted.
Do you know what a CAD report is?
Yes.
What is that?
It is the details of an event that is generated once somebody calls into our dispatch. As the dispatcher is receiving the information, they type that into the CAD event, and those are just all the details from that event.
Do you have to tell the dispatcher when you're going to a search warrant?
Like when we get assigned?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So you would have had to radio in or log in and say that you're going to this particular location?
Yes.
And so you would be in a CAD report as someone at that location?
Yes.
You mentioned that, you discussed on cross-examination with Mr. Draskovich that there was no diagram done in this case, at this location. Is that correct? This was a search warrant, right?
Yes.
It's not a crime scene?
Yes.
You're looking for evidence?
Yes.
Or the detectives are. Diagrams are at crime scenes to note where particular items of evidence are. Is that fair?
Yes, they're generally at the original crime scene.
Okay, not at search warrants?
Correct.
Because items could be hidden and obviously placed there by defendants. Items in a house are
placed or under the control of whoever's in that house. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So their location may not be accurate.
Sorry, could you?
Their location, I guess that's a bad question. Their location could be manipulated.
Potentially, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, in reference to the manipulation of these items, it could be manipulated by who's ever in the residence while you are, correct? Law enforcement.
Generally, once I arrive to the crime scene, I will photograph the scene before anybody moves anything or touches anything. So the photos that I have are in its original state as we arrived.
As you arrived, but then you would testify that you were summoned to come and photograph these various items of interest, correct?
As they're located, yes.
Yes, but you weren't doing the locating, correct?
Correct.
Same question concerning this bag, specifically State's Exhibit 306. This bag you did not find, did you?
No.
You were summoned
Yes.
with all the people coming in and out, correct?
With the detectives, the homicide detectives and specifically.
Or other detectives, whoever else was in there with law enforcement, fair to say?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
No. Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down. You are excused from your subpoena. Thank you very much for being here. This time, you may step down. At this time, we are going to recess for a break. During this recess, you must not discuss or communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by voice, phone, email, text, internet, or other means of communication or social media. Read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do research, consult dictionaries, the internet, or reference materials. Do any investigation, test a theory, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own, or form or express any opinion regarding the case until it's finally submitted to you, and will be in recess till 3:30.
Thank you. All right, connection jury, please. Jurors?
It wasn't until witnesses number 5 and 6 that we essentially got into the nitty gritty of what this case is about, which is Mr. Tellis. So the witnesses prior to that were just talking about the crime scene. They were talking about how the body was found, how the decedent's home, and essentially how these witnesses noticed that there was something wrong at the decedent's house. But witnesses 5 and 6, we're starting to get into the good stuff, especially with this last witness. So the defense did a pretty good job. So we got all those photos into evidence, and she went through the photos and said, this was this, that was that. And that's how we know that during this search, these certain items were found. Now, of course, it is the defense's position that these items were likely planted there, or at least could have been planted there. I think one of the problems here is that we would have to essentially do away with all search warrants, given the defense's theory of the case. We would have to assume that every search warrant that produces any evidence that may implicate a suspect in a crime is null and void, because there is a chance in every case that all of that evidence was planted. Now, I'm not saying that police have not planted evidence in the past and that they didn't necessarily plant it in this case, but I tend to doubt the generalization that we have at this point, that because there were multiple officers at the crime scene, that I'm sorry, at Mr. Tellis's house when this search warrant was executed, that means that something nefarious occurred with respect to these officers. It's impossible for crime scene investigators to go into a home and find the evidence every time a search warrant is executed. We rely on officers and detectives and things of that nature to go in and conduct the search of the home, and we rely on the crime scene investigators to photograph that evidence after it is located by someone. So I don't know if the jury is going to buy the theory that these investigators were planting evidence to implicate Mr. Tellis in this. We would essentially have to have a string of implausible things. So first, we would have had to have the timely death. If the defense's theory is correct, we would have to assume that the death of Mr. Gehrman was timely and just so happened to occur right when the police were trying to get this corporation to be able to continue doing business in the public administrator's office. And that the police, knowing that they wanted this corporation to continue doing business in the public administrator's office, would then want to silence Mr. Tellis. And the best way to silence him is to frame him for the murder of this person that he had at least something of a motive to kill. And then once we assume that, we then have to assume that the investigators planted the evidence that was found at the home. We have to assume that the person who committed the crime was either involved in this whole cover up, in this whole thing, or that it just so happens that they decided to drive a maroon SUV in the commission of this act, and that they just so happened to drive to Mr. Tellis's neighborhood after the act was committed. So unless the police are involved in the murder, then it begs the question, how can so many people be involved in this conspiracy to frame Mr. Tellis? And why would they do so, considering that Mr. Tellis had already lost his re-election campaign? So a new person was going to be coming into the public administrator's office and could have gone back to business as usual with whatever corporation they wanted to. So I'm not going to pass on the guilt or innocence, but I'm just going to say this. At this point in the trial, the defense's theory seems a little far-fetched. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to leave this on just in case the court returns before I return, but I will be back shortly. Stay tuned.
was
All right, we're about to be back. So I don't want to miss anything. The court is a little bit ahead of us at this point, but we won't have missed anything. We'll pick up right where the everything left off.
The testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
yes.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Jonathan, Jonathan Martinez, Martinez.
May I proceed? Thanks so much. Sir, are you familiar with a company called Multiple Plumbing Services?
Multiple pump services, yes.
Okay, what is Multiple Plumbing Services?
I work for them and we do sewer bypasses.
Okay, so what does that mean, sewer bypass?
When there needs to be work done on the sewer line, we'll create an above ground bypass, plug up the sewer line, suck it up, move it above ground, dump it off somewhere else to dry out that system so they can work on that dried out system.
Does your company perform that sort of work in residential areas?
Yes.
Is that like a 1 hour job?
No, it can go on for months, 24
Can go for
hours.
months.
Yes.
I want to turn your attention to September 2nd, 2022. Did you and your company perform a sewer maintenance project over on a street called Wintergreen?
Yes.
Okay, did you work on that day?
Yes.
If we focus on September 2nd, 2022, and we work our way back, about how long was your company working on Wintergreen?
Probably mid-August.
So you were there in the month of August.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question for you. When you would work on a project like that, was there anything that you and your fellow workers would actually wear on the construction site?
We're required to wear high-vis clothing, usually orange or yellow, with reflective vest or some kind of reflective tape on our chest.
Mr. Martinez, what is the purpose of wearing bright orange stuff when you're working on a sewer project out in a residential neighborhood?
We usually work in the middle of the road, so we need to be visible to traffic.
So you're in the middle of the street?
Yes.
So if a car drove by, in theory, as you were working, they could see you and your fellow workers all wearing orange clothing?
Yes.
And you were there during the month of August?
Yes.
How many days a week were you and your fellow workers working on Wintergreen in orange jackets?
Every day for 24 hours.
Every day for 24 hours. So if you walked through the neighborhood, people should have seen you.
Yes.
If you drove through the neighborhood, people should have seen you.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about September 2nd, 2022, probably around 10:30 in the morning, early morning hours, maybe around leading up to about noon. Are you working at Wintergreen?
Yes.
Is there a vehicle at some point around that time, around 10:30ish, catch your attention?
Yes.
Why does it catch your attention?
I was doing a route from Rock Springs to Wintergreen every 30 minutes, and I would pull up in the middle. It was more convenient for me to park in the middle, so I wouldn't have to park and then walk down. A vehicle parked in kind of like right before a barricaded sign. If that vehicle was there, it would impede traffic to turn right on, I'm not sure the street name. So when I pulled up, that vehicle was parked on that side right there.
So you were not on foot, you were in your car?
I was in the company truck.
It's like a work truck?
Yes.
Okay. And when you see this car parked over there, what kind of vehicle, what color vehicle was it?
I remember it was red.
Red. Do you see the driver?
Yes.
Is the driver wearing anything?
Orange.
Orange. First impressions, did you think he was part of your work project?
I wasn't really sure.
But he had something similar to what you and all your fellow workers who have been there for the last month have been wearing?
Similar, yes.
So do you kind of pull up in his general direction?
I pulled up in the middle of the road, and he was parked on facing the opposite direction than me on my left.
Do you remember it being filled with lots of people, or was there only one person in the car?
One person.
Okay. As you start to approach this vehicle, does that red car with the person in the orange jacket, does that person stick around?
No, he gave me a wave and then proceeded to drive away.
So that
the
person
opposite
didn't
direction.
get out and join your work site?
No,
He didn't ask where I should park to help out and work?
no,
So he just moved on?
correct.
Did you ever see that red car again as far as you remember?
Not that I remember.
Okay. You've had, at some point a couple days later, someone from the police department approaches you, isn't that right, Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Have you had a chance prior to this see some footage, maybe from some like a home surveillance camera?
Prior to that, no.
Okay. But I meant like around that time, you have seen footage previously that depicts kind of what you've described to us, is that correct?
Yes, I have seen it.
All right, at this time, and I believe we have a stipulation that states proposed 338 has been admitted into evidence.
That is correct.
We will be playing a video just entitled John Martinez Video. If we could cue over, please.
So it doesn't sound like he can identify the driver of the vehicle, which would be great, but he can't.
We'll start it up again.
He can't necessarily identify the specific vehicle.
I'm going to stop it right here. Do you see a vehicle that you just described to us previously?
Yes.
Okay, where is it located on this footage?
It's the SUV on the right top corner.
All right, resuming playing. That white truck, who's driving that white truck?
I am.
And that's kind of the interchange that you saw, correct?
That's correct.
And the driver at no point rolled down his window to ask you where he should park to join you and your fellow workers on that sewage repair project?
No.
He just drove away.
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes.
I don't know how this is very helpful to the prosecution.
You were shown this video previously, correct?
Yes, the following Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday after by a detective.
Okay, and this was 2 years ago.
Yes.
And you agree with me that you gave honest answers to the detective when you were interviewed?
Yes.
Tell me you didn't really remember the interaction, did you?
Not really.
And fair to say that, I mean, it's been 2 years, you've had a lot going on, you probably remembered it better then than you would today.
Yeah, I was pretty tired when he interviewed me, but yes.
Okay, he tape recorded your interview, correct?
I believe so.
You were asked if someone tried to get your attention and you said you didn't really remember honestly. Fair
No.
answer.
Yeah, fair answer.
Case counsel?
I have 179. Fair to say it wasn't a memorable interaction that you had.
I'm sorry?
I said fair to say that it wasn't really a memorable interaction that you had with this person in this vehicle.
I guess.
I mean,
Sort of.
tell by your face, it didn't stick. I mean, you didn't remember when you were interviewed a couple days later, really, what happened or the
No.
importance of anything. Fair to say?
No, I didn't feel like it was important, no.
You didn't feel like it was important. You never saw this person's face, correct?
I did, just for a very short time.
I see. Were you ever shown any lineups in reference to that person?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, to identify this person.
No, I was never asked to.
Okay. You never spoke to this person?
No.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Briefly. Yeah, briefly. Just to be clear, the police officer who interviewed you didn't ask you the question of, hey, did this guy ever get out and ask where he should park? That officer never asked you that question.
No.
Would you have answered it back then if you were asked that question?
Yes, I would have remembered that.
The first person who asked that question was me, correct?
Correct.
And that was today,
Yeah.
right? Additionally, The question about him getting out, asking for directions, like, that was never asked by this officer. If this driver in the orange jacket in the red car ever sought any information as to where to park. The police officer never asked you a question like that back then, correct?
Correct.
So you never had an opportunity to answer it until today. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And just to be clear, I mean, we have the video, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can see the driver doesn't get out of the car, correct?
Correct.
Okay, he just drives off once you start to approach him.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Anything else?
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down. You're excused from your subpoena. And state may call our next witness.
We're going to call Detective Cliff Mogg to stand.
I hope at some point the prosecution shows some video footage of the tag number of this vehicle so that we can actually find out who the vehicle belongs to. Right now, we're assuming that they're asking us to assume that it belonged to Mr. Tillis's wife.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Clifford, Clifford. Last name is Mogg, M as in Mary, O-G-G.
May I proceed?
You may.
All right. You don't have anyone? Okay, that's all right. Sir, normally I'd ask you what you currently do for a living, but I first want to ask you, maybe as late as, or as early as late as last year, what were you doing here in Las Vegas?
So up until August 10th of last year, when I retired, I had been a police officer for almost 40 years, 27 of that with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and 20 years as a homicide detective.
Okay. Currently, do you have a new profession, or at least a follow-up of your police work?
I'm a contract investigator for the Clark County District Attorney's Office, and I have my own company, and that's what I do currently.
Were you hired by our office to prepare kind of a PowerPoint analyzing video surveillance?
I was.
And just to be clear, was this video surveillance that you had collected when you were working as a homicide detective with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department?
Correct. On September 3rd, myself and other members of my squad responded to Mr. Gurman's residence in connection with a body that had been found in a suspicious homicidal death. I was one of the later detectives to respond, and my job at that point was to assist the other lead detectives in the case and locate surveillance video in the area of the crime.
All right. So let's talk about that first. So this PowerPoint, you prepared this PowerPoint, is that correct?
I did.
Tell this jury a little bit about the process that you and your fellow detectives, as well as patrol officers, conducted to collect all of the footage that we are about to see.
So the collection of this video actually occurred over a couple of days. On the day of our initial response to the scene, we canvassed the area looking for surveillance cameras that are located on the outside of houses, businesses that might be surrounding the area, any other type of surveillance cameras, whether they be stationary or mobile cameras that could be in the area. And then we make contact with the people who are at that residence or that business and attempt to collect video from them. In this case, there was a house directly across the street which had cameras that faced Mr. Gurman's residence. Down the street, there were a couple other houses. Some of them did not have any surveillance that was available, either because the camera didn't record it or it wasn't within the range of the camera. I recovered some surveillance video from a house at the corner of Wintergreen and Bronze Circle, which actually showed the arrival of the suspect vehicle and the suspect walking along the Wintergreen Drive.
I want to jump ahead just for 1 second before we start moving on to your PowerPoint. You mentioned you found footage on wintergreen of the suspect vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In your line of work, whether it's in a residential area like in the outdoors or maybe at a casino, is there a process that if you find a suspect or a person of interest, is there a method in which you try to track the movements of someone?
Yes. So once we collect surveillance video and we collect it for a certain time frame where we believe the crime occurred or where the suspect may have been in the area, at that point, we start reviewing the camera footage from the time that we get it until the time that video footage ends, looking for the suspect. If we find the suspect or the suspect's vehicle in any of those video clips, then what we do is start going backwards and looking further down the street, around the corner, down the other streets, businesses that are in the area, to see if we can determine when the suspect or the suspect's vehicle arrived in the area and when it left and what route it took to either arrive at the scene or depart from the scene.
And so ultimately you are trying to find ideally the ultimate origin, let's say in this case the suspect car, trying to find the ultimate origin of that suspect car, and you're trying to find the final destination of the car. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
Can you tell, once you found this vehicle, were you able to track it beyond just, Wintergreen and Bronze Circle? Were you able to start collecting surveillance that extended beyond just those couple of streets?
Yes.
Okay, how far out are you going, sir?
Miles. I think it's actually, driving the route, it's approximately 5.4 miles out that we went to collect video.
So you just kind of start what? Hitting businesses or restaurant or residences kind of all along this route that you believe this car is taken?
Correct.
And that's what you did in this case?
Yes.
How did you do that? Is it just a one-person job? How many officers took part in this?
So there were 6 people on my squad. We had other detectives that assisted us. There were detectives from the digital forensic unit that helped us. We had other units within the Metropolitan Police Department that assisted us in canvassing the area for surveillance video. All told, I believe I probably had 25 detectives looking for surveillance video.
Have you ever heard of the term of kind of gridding something out?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So it's just giving areas of responsibility to different detectives to look for surveillance video within that area.
Okay, let's start getting to it. What do we see here? What is on this first slide?
So this first slide, there was a multitude of surveillance video cameras that were located. We were able to collect surveillance video from several of the digital video recorders. Some of it was of evidentiary value, some of it was not. This right here is a listing, just the first 6, of locations that had video that was of an evidentiary value that I used in constructing this PowerPoint.
And let me just stop you right there. And just to be clear, the suspect vehicle is not the only thing that you were tracking, correct, in terms of this PowerPoint and the compilation of the video, is that right?
That's correct. We also tracked the victim.
Okay, so for example, I see number 3. What's significant about number 3?
So number 3 is Roberto's Taco Shop. It's located just north of Charleston on Rainbow, and the victim actually went there at about 9 o'clock in the morning on September 2nd, 2022.
And I see these, you kind of have these parentheses for each one. I'm talking about DVR time. Why did you put that there, Detective?
So this gives.
If you remember, one of the detectives on the scene said that they went through the garbage at the victim's house, and they pulled out a receipt from the Roberto's Taco Shop that placed him at Roberto's at approximately 9-something a.m. that morning.
Gives us the approximate offset time from the actual time versus what was on the DVR. A lot of times DVR times are off. Sometimes they're way off. It just depends how the system is connected. If it's connected to the internet, then the time is normally accurate. If it's not, and it relies on somebody at the business to set the time, then the time can be off by any amount. And I always, if I'm within a minute, I normally just call it like 12:30. It could be 12:31, it could be 12:29, but I just give that 60 seconds in there for error.
Okay. Are these just another, I guess, 7 sources of camera footage that we're ultimately going to see?
This is just a continuation of where we recovered surveillance video that had an evidentiary value.
Is this additional footage?
Correct.
And additional footage?
Yes.
So I see the last number here is 22. So there's 20 different cameras that were used to put this presentation together.
22.
Was this kind of what you were just kind of talking to us about?
Yes.
Sorry, if I jumped ahead, I apologize, Detective. What is significant about this slide, sir?
So after we identified the suspect in the case as Mr. Tejas, then what I did was just used what I felt was probably one of the most direct routes that would give me an idea of the distance between Mr. Tejas' residence and Mr. Gurman's residence. In this case, it's approximately 5.3 miles.
And this is kind of the path that you ultimately can follow with the suspect vehicle, correct?
Yes.
What is this?
So this is a photograph of Mr. Gurman's Honda Civic.
Okay. And what is this?
And this is a photograph of Mr. Tejas' maroon GMC Yukon Denali.
We'll talk about this Denali in a little bit once we're kind of through the footage, because I'll have to switch over to the other projector, but let's look at this. How are we going to start?
So this is the first movement of the victim. At about 8:47 in the morning, he leaves his residence. The direction of travel he went was north on Wintergreen, and then we don't have any surveillance video of him after he goes north on Wintergreen. And so this, where the red circle is just his vehicle leaving Bronze Circle from the direction of his residence. And then again, I did the same thing, just an approximate route that I believe Mr. Gurman would have taken to get to Roberto's Taco Shop, and that's approximately 2.4 miles.
And what are we looking at here?
So this is Roberto's Taco Shop at 907 South Rainbow at about 9:04 in the morning. And again, this is a corrected time. So when I say corrected, it's just corrected for the differentiation from the actual time and the DVR time. And the victim arrives in his vehicle and parks in the parking lot on the south side of the business. And then this camera right here is the approximate location of the camera that captured that. This is Mr. Gurman arriving. So the clothing that Mr. Gurman is wearing was important to me later on in my examination of the surveillance video, because this is the same clothing he wears when he comes out of his house.
What are we looking at this slide?
This is just a photograph of Mr. Gurman at the cash register inside the Roberto Taco Shop, and that's, again, about 9:04 in the morning.
All right, so we've now moved on to a new slide. What is significant about 9601 Red Hills Drive?
So this is I hope I pronounce this right, Pidgeot Elementary School. It is directly south of the road leading to Mr. Gurman's, or Mr. Tejas' residence.
So if you can show us, where's Mr. Tejas' residence?
Right up here where the red pin is.
Okay, is that, I'm gonna walk up here. Is this a driveway? Is that what we're looking at? Is that a driveway out onto Spanish Steps?
Yes.
Okay, so if you just pulled out of that driveway and came down Silk Castle, that would be the straight route if Mr. Tellis was leaving his house to make his way out, I guess, out in that direction. Would that be fair?
Correct. It's just a short eastbound jaunt and then south onto the street.
So, just to be clear, this is at 9:10 in the morning. What are we gonna see footage of here?
So this, you'll see Mr. Tejas arriving at his residence, and you'll see the red Yukon Denali traveling westbound and then northbound.
So back in the direction of his house.
Correct.
And just to be clear, you said that the process is you start with the car and then you start working in a direction, collect video, right? Until you
Yes.
find the final destination, right?
Correct.
So this is the final origin spot, correct?
Yes.
But you had to look at video prior to this, seeing the path of travel from the Bronze Circle residence, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, or Wintergreen, right? Thank you. All right, so we've got, just to go back, so we're at about 9:10 in the morning for Tejas' Denali at this point, correct?
Correct. He's arriving home.
All right, so now, why are we looking at this slide next?
This is another slide of the victim. So at 9:11 in the morning, the victim leaves the restaurant, gets into his car. He travels west in the parking lot, then goes north in front of the Home Depot there at Rainbow and Charleston, and then he turns back out onto Rainbow Boulevard.
Okay, so this is a minute apart, right? So Gehrman's at the taco shop, Tejas is on his way home,
That's
or in
correct.
that direction at least.
Yes. There's Mr. Gurman leaving the restaurant. And in addition to this, I also looked at the other cameras from these businesses to see if there was another red Yukon Denali that had followed Mr. Gurman there or followed him away, and I did not see one.
Okay, so during the time that you have eyes on Mr. Gehrman's car, at least at this point in time, you're not seeing a red Yukon.
I'm not.
All right. Now, what is significant about this slide?
This is at 9:12 in the morning, again from Pidgeot Elementary School. And this is a camera, same angle as the last time, showing Mr. Tejas arriving. This is showing Mr. Tejas leaving the area of his residence, traveling south, and then traveling east on the street in front of the school.
And that would be Red Hills Road.
Correct.
So theoretically, someone else could have driven a different red SUV down Mr. Tejas' street in an attempt to make it look like Mr. Tejas was the one driving down his street, because the camera footage is taken from a distance away from Mr. Tejas' house, and we don't actually see the vehicle leave Mr. Tejas' driveway or his home.
So this is at 9:19 in the morning. This is a camera that was located at 1405 Wintergreen Drive, which is just southeast of Bronze Circle where the victim lived. The victim drove northbound on Wintergreen Circle and then turned west onto Bronze Circle toward his house.
Has approximately 8 minutes elapsed since he left the Robertos.
Approximately, yes. There's his vehicle. Making the westbound turn on Bronze Circle.
And so that's Bronze Circle beyond that tree there?
Yes.
Okay.
And then at 10:03, the victim left his residence again, traveled north on Wintergreen to Vegas Drive. And then this camera is located at 7200 Periwinkle. It's on Wintergreen, just south of Vegas, and it'll show the victim driving north on Wintergreen and then turning eastbound onto Vegas Drive at about 10:03 in the morning.
Did you also, at this point, with this type of footage, look to see if there's any red Yukons following him?
Not yet.
Okay.
Here you can see he makes the turn, and there are no other vehicles that follow him.
All right, what is significant about this slide, sir?
So this is the first slide, first time that I captured the red Yukon Denali at 10:26 in the morning, traveling southbound on Rock Springs Drive. This is, you can see in the yellow there where Mr. Gurman's residence is located. It's a couple blocks to the east. And this is again at 10:26 in the morning, and it was captured by a camera on the east side of that address. And then these are just stills because the vehicle drove by too fast to be of any use.
What's significant about this area?
At 10:26 in the morning, further down the street on Rock Springs is Cornflower Drive. This video was recovered from 7125 Cornflower Drive at 10:26 in the morning, and the red Yukon drove west on Cornflower. And it's captured by that camera on the north side of the house.
Okay.
At 10:30 in the morning, the house on the corner of Wintergreen and Vegas at 7200 Periwinkle. The victim drove west on Vegas Drive, then turned southbound onto Wintergreen back into the direction of his house. And again, you can see there are no other vehicles that followed the victim into the neighborhood.
And what's significant about this timestamp?
So at 10:39, saw the red Yukon traveling from westbound Vegas Drive to southbound Wintergreen. This is the same direction that the victim had just traveled. And again, 10:39 in the morning from 7200 Periwinkle, and it was the camera located on the east side of the residence.
And if we just go back for a second, so this is at 10:30. So Garman's coming in at 10:30, and this is approximately 9 minutes later.
Yes. And all of these videos are at the actual speed. When I reviewed the surveillance videos, I slowed these down to a quarter to an eighth of the speed so that I could look at details.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a still from that last video from 7200 Periwinkle, and this shows the suspect who's clad in an orange traffic shirt, sitting in the driver's seat. The passenger visor is down and the driver visor is down.
Did that take on later significance for your investigation, Detective?
It did.
Why is that?
When I went to Mr. Teaz's residence several days after the murder, I located a similar red Yukon Denali parked in his driveway, and everything that I had seen on the surveillance video was similar to Mr. Teaz's video, or to Mr. Teaz's vehicle, including the fact that that passenger visor was still down.
Okay, we're gonna pause that presentation for a second. I want to show council 314, 17, 317, 319, 322, 325, and 313. Objections? Okay. Any objections to their admission? No. Okay. At this time, we're going to ask permission to admit states 313, 314, 317, 319, 322, and 325.
So far, there have been very few objections in this trial.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to do to make it a little easier, I'll walk up and show the jury so we don't have to keep moving the computer. But take a look at these exhibits and tell me if you recognize what we're looking at there.
So these are photographs taken of Mr. Teaz's vehicle as he was parked in the driveway in front of his residence on the date that we executed a search warrant.
Now, you mentioned that one of the things that jumped out to you was when you saw that vehicle at his house parked, there was something about the visor that jumped out to you. What was that again?
That the visor was down in the same position that it was in this surveillance picture.
Okay. I want to show you 317 and 319. Is that depicting what you're talking about?
It is.
And is that essentially what you're circling there in that photograph, on that PowerPoint presentation?
That's correct.
Permission to publish to the jury, Your Honor? Thank you very much. Showing the jury 317 and 319.
There's also one other feature that I saw.
Okay.
If you look,
Here, there's no question pending.
All right. Detective, are there any other features that you noticed?
there was.
Okay, what was it?
If you look at the surveillance photo on the screen, below the visor, on the edge of the window, next to the hood of the car, there's a light-colored area. There was a similar light-colored area on Mr. Teaz's vehicle when I found it parked in his driveway.
Detective Bogg, why don't you step down for a second? Do you see it in this photograph? That light-colored area?
Right there.
Let the record reflect the witness has pointed to the bottom right-hand corner of the front windshield of that Yukon Denali. And it looks almost, it's lighter, and it kind of looks orangish, but it's not quite a rectangle. For the record, you said that jumped out to you when you saw the car in person?
Correct.
I'd like to show you states 317. Do you see it?
Yes.
Can you, why don't you come on down and show them what you saw when you looked at it in person?
So it's this light-colored area right there.
Let the record reflect, again, he's pointed in 317 to kind of a rectangular area right in the bottom corner of that front windshield. What's it say on the front passenger door there? Does that have lettering on that door?
Denali.
Okay, and when we look at 322 here, what does it say on the front passenger door?
Denali.
Tell me about the wheels for a second. Are the rims similar?
They are.
Okay. May I have approaching with states 322? Here's another question, Detective. The windows, the front passenger windows, anything significant about the front passenger windows as it relates to the rear windows?
So as I reviewed the surveillance video, I noticed that the front driver and front passenger window were not tinted, but the windows behind them were. When I arrived at Mr. Teaz's residence, I noticed that the driver and front passenger window were not tinted and the rest were.
Showing the jury states 322 and 325. When you watch this video, or this Denali on the video surveillance, do you see any bumper stickers or decals or anything like that?
None.
And when you saw Mr. Tejas' or Teles's car in its driveway, did it have any stickers on it anywhere?
No.
Publishing 313. Okay, let's move back to this presentation. What is significant about this slide, sir?
So this is at 10:39 in the morning, again from the 1405 Wintergreen residence. The red Yukon drove south past the house, and the driver appeared the PD only occupant in the vehicle. And then less than a minute later, that same Yukon drove north on Wintergreen.
Now, did you noted that there was something about the license plate that was significant in the footage?
Yeah, it didn't appear to have a rear license plate during the time that I saw it driving around the neighborhood.
Now, Detective, how long had you been a police officer for?
About 40 years.
How many years on homicide?
20.
Have you ever had a case when a suspect might, I don't know, remove his license plate when going off to commit a crime?
Yes.
Objection, counsel. Thank you.
Let's move on.
So the jury has already been instructed not to consider evidence, not to consider things people say after an objection has been sustained. But the jury heard it. The jury heard that this officer had seen instances where people take the license plates off of vehicles before going out to commit a crime. And you can't unhear something. So yeah, they're not allowed to consider it, but oftentimes as attorneys, we'll throw things out there, try to get a quick answer. And if we get that answer, even though there's an objection, at least the jury heard it. That's why he was so willing to just move on and not try to somehow correct the question. It wasn't integral to his case. He just wanted the jury to hear it.
What do we have here in this slide?
So this is 37 seconds later at about 10:40 in the morning. The red Yukon drove south on Wintergreen Drive and stopped momentarily across the street from 1405. And this is where it pulls in and stops.
Now, Detective, I don't know if you were familiar with this, but were you aware that there was like a sewer repair project going on in that area?
I was.
So remind me, when you're driving down that road, what street are you heading towards now?
Cornflowers down that way.
Okay.
There's-
I just wanted to see if maybe when we get to a map, I just kind of want to see if you can help me orient that. Why are these pictures isolated?
Those are just two stills of the Yukon and the suspect sitting in the driver's seat as they were parked across the street from 1405.
And any significant about the windows?
Same thing, the front passenger and the front driver window were not tinted, the rest were.
All right. Okay, so Cornflower. So this is the area that we're talking about here?
Yes.
Okay, so when we looked at that last footage, is the car, I'm assuming this is north, south, east, west, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so when we saw the footage with the construction truck where they had that interaction, can you come down here and show me where that interaction is? And then where does the red Yukon kind of drive towards?
So this is Bronze Circle right here, Mr. Gurman's residence. The Yukon parked right across the street here for a brief instant. That sewer truck backed up here, and then the Yukon drove south on Wintergreen.
Okay. All right, what is significant about this slide, sir?
At 1048, at 7004 Copperleaf Drive, which is just south of Cornflower. The Yukon drove west in front of that residence, then made a U-turn and went east on Copperleaf Drive.
Is this a still of that footage?
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
This is another video of the Yukon as it drove west on Lunar Light Drive in front of 6905 at about 10:49 in the morning.
Is this a still from that footage?
Yes.
And now what are we looking at here?
10:54 in the morning from 7200 Periwinkle. This is just south of Vegas on Wintergreen. The red Yukon turned south onto Wintergreen Drive from westbound Vegas Drive, and the driver was still wearing the orange shirt.
This is a still from that?
Yes.
Okay. What about this footage here?
I'm going to go back to that
This,
still
is 7200
because
Bronze.
I didn't see the visor being down on the passenger side. Let me know what you see.
Window were not tinted. The rest were.
Here is, okay.
As it drove west on Lunar Light Drive in front of 6905 at about.
Is this a still from that footage?
Yes.
And now what are we looking at here?
10:54 in the morning from 7200 Periwinkle. This is just south of Vegas on Wintergreen. The red Yukon turned south onto Wintergreen Drive from westbound Vegas Drive, and the driver was still wearing the orange shirt.
So remember this person was saying that the passenger visor was down when he saw the vehicle at Mr. Tellis's house. I don't see the passenger visor in this particular shot. It doesn't look like there's something down there, but you know, look at it, make your own, draw your own opinions as to what you see.
This is a still from that?
Yes.
Okay. What about this footage here?
So this is 7200 Bronze Circle. It's right at the corner of Bronze Circle and Wintergreen. At 10:56 in the morning, the red Yukon was captured on the surveillance camera on the east side of the house. It stopped briefly, and then it continued south on Wintergreen Drive, and you can see the yellow reflective bands on the suspect's shirt.
There's certainly not a license plate on that vehicle, though.
And then between 10:59 and 11:01, the suspect seen here with the beige gardener hat, the orange shirt with the reflective stripes, the dark pants, and the gray tennis shoes, walked north and south along Wintergreen briefly before he continued north on Wintergreen.
What are we looking at here?
So this is from 1405 Wintergreen Drive. That video was corrupt. It had a lot of blank spaces in it where there was just static. It did not show the arrival of the Denali in front of the residence, but at 11:01 hours when the video started up again, the Denali was already parked.
All right. Now, why is this footage significant, sir?
So this is where I capture the suspect walking south on Wheatland Way. And then after he walks south past 1505 Wheatland, he turns around and walks northbound again up to Periwinkle. And here you can see the suspect with his hat, his jacket, the pants, the shoes, and he was also carrying a bluish-gray bag with dark straps on it.
Okay, what are we looking at here?
Okay, 7200 Bronze Circle. We've seen the video from this house several times. The camera on the east side of the house faces Wintergreen, and this will show the suspect at about 11:16 in the morning walking south on the sidewalk along Wintergreen toward Bronze Circle.
And just to be clear, when we looked at the footage before, we were looking at footage from Wheatland Way, right?
Yes,
And so was the final footage, is he walking north around that corner? Is that what we're seeing there?
he's coming south
So he's
on
walking,
Wintergreen
so he's,
toward Bronze Circle,
so he's on that road up there making his way towards Wintergreen.
Periwinkle, yes.
Is that, I can't see the brown circle blocking it. Would it say Periwinkle behind the brown circle?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's what we see on the previous footage, and now we're gonna see some continuation, yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
This is the suspect, still dressed the way he was on the previous video, walking south toward Bronze Circle.
What are we looking at here?
This is, again, the same camera faces northwest from 1405 Wintergreen towards Bronze Circle, and you can see the suspect at about 11:17 walking westbound on Bronze Circle along the sidewalk.
All right, what is significance about the next slide?
So this is surveillance video from directly across the street from Mr. Gehrman's residence. It's located at 7217 Bronze Circle. At about 11:17 in the morning, the suspect walks westbound on Bronze Circle, where the red dotted line is, to the west side of Mr. Gehrman's residence. When he leaves, several minutes later, he walks back eastbound on Bronze Circle toward Wintergreen, where the blue dotted line is.
Okay, so the red dotted line signifies the approach, and the blue signifies the exit.
Yes. So you can see the suspect in the upper part of the video.
Is there division, there's not additional footage at
No,
this point?
just click it again.
Okay.
Right, this is another camera on that same residence, and this is facing north toward Mr. Gurman's garage and the west side of his house. And you can see the suspect walking across the driveway up to the gate area on the west side of the house. Okay, you can go to the next slide.
What are we looking at here?
11:21 hours, the victim's garage door opens, and then you'll see Mr. Gehrman walk from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen back to that gate area. And he's wearing the same clothes that he was wearing at the time that he was at the Roberto Taco Shop. And as soon as he gets back near the gate, you'll see the suspect come out. Right there. So the attack occurs over here on the west side of the garage.
So the prosecution is establishing the elements of the crime, that the several crimes with which Mr. Tellis is being charged, that this person lied in wait, that this was premeditated, the meandering around the neighborhood, then going to Mr. Gehrman's house, lying in wait for him, and then attacking him, establishes those elements that they need to establish with respect to the suspect, with respect to the assailant. They still have to prove that that assailant was in fact Mr. Tellis, but they are doing a very good job of establishing the elements of the crimes with which he has been charged.
And here comes the suspect. And now he's going to leave the area eastbound on Bronze Circle. This is back to the other camera angle at the same address. You can see him walking along the sidewalk again. And he continues walking eastbound to Wintergreen.
What are we looking at here?
This is 11:25 in the morning. The camera at 1405 Wintergreen Drive. The suspect walked to the red Yukon from Bronze Circle. He put his bag into the left rear seat. Then he got into the driver's seat and drove south on Wintergreen.
Were there absolutely no cameras on Mr. Tellis's street that would have picked up whether or not this was actually Mr. Tellis? Nobody had a ring cam at this juncture. I mean, this was 2022. It wasn't that long ago. I would expect that at this point in a neighborhood like Mr. Tellis was living in, there's at least one ring camera on every block. But apparently that wasn't the case, or the officers just were unable to find someone willing to give them the ring cam footage. I don't know.
What are we
This is
looking at
just
here?
a still of the suspect getting into the driver's seat. And you can see the same hat, same jacket, pants, and shoes.
Moving on, what are we looking at here?
And this is 11:30 at 1501 Rock Springs Drive, which was an apartment complex located on Rock Springs. Recorded the suspect's red Yukon driving north on Rock Springs Drive toward Vegas Drive.
Is this just a still from that?
That's correct.
What do we have here?
So this is 11:29 in the morning from the address at 7200 Perry.
So I'm going to go back to that still. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Is this just a still from that?
That's correct.
What do we have here?
So this is 11:29 in the morning from the address at 7200 Periwinkle, again, the corner of Wintergreen and Vegas. And it shows the red Yukon turning from westbound Vegas Drive to southbound Wintergreen at 11:29 in the morning.
Is this a still of that?
Yes.
What do we have in this slide?
We're back to 7200 Bronze Circle, the address directly across the street from Mr. Gehrman's residence. At 11:29, the suspect's red Yukon drove westbound on Bronze Circle, pulled up in front of Mr. Gehrman's house, stopped. The suspect got out of the driver's seat, went back to the area where the attack occurred, and then returned to his vehicle and left eastbound on Bronze Circle. Next slide. I think it might have froze up.
Oh, okay, I'll go back.
So this is the point at which investigators believe that the assailant was returning to the scene of the crime just to make sure that the decedent was in fact deceased, likely in an effort to ensure that there were no witnesses who could identify the assailant. Had Mr. Gehrman survived, obviously, if he knew the assailant, he would have been able to identify him. Mr. Gehrman did know Mr. Tellis. So if Mr. Tellis was indeed the perpetrator of this crime, Mr. Gehrman would have been able to identify him if he had not passed away.
Let's see if I can see if this does it.
They seem to be having some technical difficulties. I'm guessing based on the intro to all of these videos that we're seeing, we're about to see the assailant's vehicle driving on its path to Mr. Tellis's neighborhood, but we are not going to see anything on Mr. Tellis's street. So theoretically, again, this could be someone else's red Yukon, and there could have been a different person in that driver's seat other than Mr. Tellis. And they are trying to frame Mr. Tellis for this crime. Still a little far-fetched in my view, but still not outside the realm of possibility.
Yes.
I'd be interested to know if this investigator who was compiling this footage looked beyond the time that Mr. Tellis's or the assailant's vehicle entered Mr. Tellis's neighborhood to see if there's other footage of this vehicle after the time that it entered Mr. Tellis's neighborhood, or if there's no footage from anywhere around there after that, as if the vehicle parked while it was in Mr. Tellis's neighborhood. And this is the return of the assailant to the victim's house.
Making a U-turn and going back eastbound on Bronze Circle. Then you'll see it turn northbound onto Wintergreen.
They keep showing Mr. Tellis. Mr. Tellis does know that he has cameras watching him, so don't pay any attention to his facial expressions. Surprise and shock could mean anything.
You'll see the red Yukon traveling northbound on Wintergreen, and then it makes a westbound turn onto Vegas.
What are we looking at here?
So this is Sunspot Street. The house actually backs up to Washington, and there's a camera located at the back of the residence that faces south toward Washington, covers kind of the backyard area of the house. At 11:35, the suspect's red Yukon drove west on Washington Avenue from Tenaya Way.
Is that a screen grab of that car driving by?
It is, and then that is a highlighted area where there appears now to be a license plate on the vehicle. So this is the Winco Food at 7501 West Washington. It's further west than the last still photo that you saw. At 11:36, the suspect's red Yukon continued westbound on Washington toward Buffalo.
Is that a still of that?
It is. And again, you can see the white spot on the rear of the car where it appears now that the license plate has been reattached. This is the Arco gas station in 901 North Buffalo. It's at the northwest corner of Buffalo and Washington, and it has cameras that face east and south, and it captured the red Yukon arriving at the intersection going through the intersection, turning southbound onto Buffalo at about 9:36 and 9:37 in the morning.
9:36?
11:36 and 11:37.
And those are just stills reflecting that?
Yes.
Okay. What do we see here?
This is the P.F. Chang Restaurant at 1095 South Rampart. It's at the northwest corner of Rampart and Charleston, and it has cameras on both the east side and the south side of the business, which cover Rampart and Charleston. And at about 11:47 in the morning, the red Yukon drove south on Rampart toward Charleston.
And it's about a 5-mile distance between these two residences, is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
Is this a still footage from that P.F. Chang's?
Yes. Vehicle then turned westbound onto Charleston, and at 11:48, the camera on the south side of the P.F. Chang's captured the vehicle as it drove westbound.
Is that a still of that footage?
Yes.
All right, what are we looking at here?
We continued canvassing further west on Charleston, and there was a camera located at the entrance of the Avondale Apartments at 9225 West Charleston, and 11:48 in the morning, it captured the red Yukon traveling westbound on Charleston toward Apple.
And is that just in the corner over there, is that the P.F. Chang's?
Yes.
Okay. And to the right corner for the record. Is this a still from that Avondale footage?
Correct.
What are we looking at here?
So at 11:50 in the morning, the cameras at the Thomas and Mack medical offices located in 9499 West Charleston Boulevard captured the red Yukon traveling south on Apple.
Is that the footage?
Yes.
And what are we looking at here?
And now we're back to Pidgeot Elementary School at 9601 Red Hills Drive. At 11:51 in the morning, it captured the red Yukon traveling traveling westbound on Red Hills and then making a northbound turn onto Silk Tassel toward Mr. Tejas' residence.
And if we could just go back for a second, where is Red Hills in relation to, we're gonna look at that slide in a minute. Can you show us where Red Hills is in relation to the previous footage? And maybe just come down and show us.
So Apple Drive is right here, and then this is Red Hills.
And is this the Pidgeot Elementary here?
Yes.
And this is that road that gets to this house? Okay. Thank you. Let the record reflect the witness identified a road that was kind of yellow highlighted going vertically on the picture as being Apple. And then he indicated the yellow highlighted road going left to right as being Red Hills. And then indicated a road in between Spanish Steps and Red Hills as Tassel.
Silk Tassel.
Silk Tassel, sorry about that.
All right, so I'm gonna pause it right there. This is likely the last video surveillance that they have because we don't have anything showing the vehicle entering Mr. Tellis's driveway. I will note that none of the images, none of the video surveillance on the alleged return trip to Mr. Tellis's house depict the driver of the vehicle. You can't see what the driver is wearing, whether they have on that orange jumpsuit, things of that nature. So again, it could very well be that this person, that someone else was the driver of the vehicle that didn't have a license plate, and Mr. Tellis is just minding his business and happened to be driving his vehicle home just after, the attack took place. That could have happened.
So I have a couple of other questions. You mentioned that you did extensive canvassing, is that correct?
Yes,
Did you, ultimately, there's a search warrant executed at Mr. Tellis's house, correct?
that's correct.
Was there a search for surveillance cameras attached to that house?
There was.
Were you able to collect any footage from that house?
I located a camera. If you're looking at the garage, it would be up near the roof line to the right. The residence was searched for digital video recorders by other detectives and digital forensic detectives. We were unable to recover any digital surveillance video from that camera. They did recover some from a Ring camera, but it had no evidentiary value.
Was anything disconnected?
I don't recall whether anything was disconnected or it was just not recording.
Okay, so the bottom line is you couldn't get anything from that house, even though there are cameras at that house.
That's correct.
Here's another question. Did you canvass or search that neighborhood to see if there were any other red Yukon Denali's in his neighborhood?
I drove the area as part of the surveillance team, and I didn't see any other red Yukons in that neighborhood. It's a rather small neighborhood.
Okay. Additionally, as another role in your case, did you have anything to do with reviewing historical tower record data regarding Mr. Tellis's phone?
I did.
Based on that data, during the time of when this killing occurs, does the historical phone data from the phone show any movement on the phone?
It does not. It appears that his phone was located at his residence. It relayed through several cell sites located in the area of his residence, not near Mr. Gurman's residence.
Okay. Have you had situations in your investigations?
Again, objection calls for speculations.
Well, Your Honor, maybe, can we approach? Can we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So without hearing the rest of the question, the defense objected and said that essentially the question calls for speculation. He can certainly testify as to whether or not in other investigations they found that a suspect or a criminal left their telephone in a specific location and then went and committed a crime. People could have admitted to that during one of his investigations. He can certainly testify to that. He can't testify as to whether or not he thought that maybe somebody left their phone in their home during the course of one of their prior investigations. That would be him speculating as to what a potential suspect may or may not have done. So we'll see how the judge handles this. So far, there have been very few objections. I don't think there were any objections with the first, I want to say 5 witnesses. There were a couple objections to the 6th witness. We're now on the 8th witness, and there's probably been about 4 or 5 objections so far today. So this isn't a very contentious case thus far, but again, we are only in the first day. So we'll see what happens after this, and we'll see if Mr. Tellis is going to testify when the defense has an opportunity to go on direct. I believe that there are 20 witnesses for one side and 15 witnesses for the other side. We are now on the 8th witness for the prosecution, so they are going at a pretty fast clip. But I don't, perhaps they are, you know.
So Detective, how many years have you been working how many years do you work as a police officer?
Approximately 40.
Were you with Metro when cell phones started coming onto the scene? Would that be fair? I don't want to date anything, but I don't know. Okay, so cell phones have been around less than 40 years. Would that be fair?
Are you old? That's what he just asked him.
What are historical phone records?
So historical phone records, you get them in a couple different formats. One of them is call detail records. Call detail records can include not only your voice communication, but also your data and text messaging. And if there is normally with all of your voice communications, unless it's voice over internet, you're going to connect to a cell site. So that location of the cell site is recorded on the call detail records. There are some phone providers that actually will locate their text messaging onto a cell site, and you can get that location information from there, as well as data. Other phone companies do not provide location data with text messaging.
Okay. How are these utilized in terms of reviewing records to see a phone interact? What's the significance of a phone interacting with a cell tower? Why is that significant for your investigations?
So a couple different things. It gives me an idea of where geographically that phone is located at the time it makes a connection to the cell site. There's also other data that the phone companies use where they will actually ping your phone just so that they can test their network to determine where there's bad connection, where there's good connection. And we can use that data to also locate where a phone is. Now, I can't locate where the person is unless I can associate them making calls that they normally make at the time that that phone makes a connection to a cell site.
Or for example, you might end up getting a download of the phone at a later point. Maybe you see text messages being sent, and you can see, maybe based on the context of it, oh, this particular person that we think is linked to the phone is using it based off of maybe the message that they're sending, things like that.
That's correct.
Is historical
That was a leading question.
significant or helpful for your investigations?
They're quite helpful in investigations.
Why?
Well, we can determine where someone's phone could be at the time that a crime was committed. We can track them using their phone location at various times when they're making calls or sending text or using data.
And in your experience of 4 decades, have you made arrests in part based off of tracking the movements of a suspect's phone?
Absolutely.
Okay, and have you testified in court about this very information that we're talking about?
Numerous times. I'm an expert in the 8th Judicial District Court.
Okay. Have you had experiences where a suspect, have you had experiences, I think you've explained this already, but have you had experiences where suspects, moved around with the phone and you could see that phone move?
So it sounds like the judge's ruling on that objection that we just heard was that he has to lay a proper foundation, which is what he just spent all these questions since that objection was determined. He has to lay a proper foundation in order to be able to ask the questions that he's about to ask right now. So all the rest of that's not what he was after. He's after this.
Moving in relation to your crime?
Yes.
Okay. Have there been situations, though, where a phone may have been left behind by a suspect?
Yes.
Have there been situations where suspects have just turned off the phone, maybe during the relevant time period?
Yes.
Those are 2 ways to maybe not get picked up, right, through the historical data.
That's correct.
And just to be clear, during this time period of when this killing occurs, his phone is pinging off of towers right next to his house, correct?
Correct.
Court's indulgent. I have no further questions. Oh, do you want okay, I'll just. Okay, any objections?
No objection.
All right, we have states proposed 311 and 337 have been admitted by stipulation.
Is that correct?
May I
Yes, Your
approach?
Honor. Thank
They're
you.
admitted.
Sir, do you recognize what you're looking at in these images?
Yes, these are still photographs of the suspect as he walked north on Wheatland, where you saw him walking south, and he turns around and goes back northbound again toward Periwinkle. In this case, this photo is actually zoomed in from the regular video, and it shows the beige landscaping hat with the 3 black ventilation rings on the right side. It shows a black band that goes through the hat up here and then kind of goes around, and then there's also a black trim around the front of the hat, the rim. Shows the gray backpack with the black straps, the orange traffic vest with the reflective stripes on it, the blue pants, and the gray and dark tennis shoes.
And now that it's at least 3
So I don't know the answer to this. Maybe one of you in the chat can let me know if you know. If I've got my phone sitting in my house and there's incoming calls going to it, can somebody use historical data to determine that there were incoming calls that were not answered or incoming text messages that were not answered during the relevant time frame? I'd be interested to know if uh, Mr. Tellis was using his phone during the relevant time frame at issue here, because if it was being used and it was in his home, that's a little better than it was just in his home, for him anyway.
Wrapping up, but I'll publish 337. Fair to say 311 and 337 are essentially the exact same photo, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We'll just move this out of the way. And let's publish 337. Let me zoom out. Okay, so this is what you were just referring to, is that correct?
Correct.
This is likely going to be the last witness of the day.
Okay, so at this time, we are going to conclude for the evening. During this recess, you're admonished not to discuss or communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by voice, phone, email, text, internet, or other means of communication or social media. Read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do any research, consult dictionaries, the internet, or reference materials. Do any investigation, test a theory, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own, or form or express any opinion regarding the case till it's finally submitted to you. We will be in recess till tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Juror number 3, if you don't mind staying behind for just a minute. Other than that, everyone else is excused.
Thank you. All rise for acting jury, please. Sirs. Yeah, leave your notebooks on.
All right, so that's it for today. The defense attorney is going to have an opportunity to cross first thing tomorrow morning. And then, of course, there may be some redirect, things of that nature, but he'll take the stand again tomorrow, first thing. And we'll be covering that here. Just as a recap of the things that we learned today, the things that actually came out during the substantive witness's testimony. We heard from the CSI person that, she took all the photos, so she was able to get all those photographs into evidence, and we're going to probably continue to see those photos throughout the trial. Now that they are in evidence, anybody can look at them. And questions can be asked of them. There was another person whose name I did not catch, who testified regarding the entry into Mr. Tellis's home to conduct a search warrant. And she didn't know what investigators were present, and she didn't know who was interacting with the evidence. There was what she described as a fair amount of chaos, or what the defense attorney described as a fair amount of chaos at the scene of this search warrant being executed. And she was being called in multiple directions. So she was unable to say whether or not certain things were present when she initially got to Mr. Tellis's house. Essentially, the defense attorney is trying to infer that this evidence was planted. That's going to be the straw hat, these shoes, and the duffel bag. She was there for about 4 hours, so of course it's going to be impossible for her to have had eyes on everything at all times. But on redirect, the prosecutor did a good job of saying, look, even though she doesn't know who was there, there's a CAD report that shows everybody who is going to the scene of any search warrant as it's being executed. So we do know who was there, even if she doesn't. So the fact that she didn't include it in her report really doesn't matter. And she was questioned about whether or not she took a diagram of the home so she could, I guess, point to where things were in the home. And she said she didn't diagram it. And on redirect, it came out that the police don't diagram homes when they are conducting a search warrant. They do that when when they're investigating a crime scene. So she did a pretty good job of on redirect for that particular witness. Jonathan Martinez, that was the plumbing guy. He really didn't offer anything substantive. He said, yeah, I saw this SUV with someone in it that I can't identify, but we saw that in the video surveillance footage, so we really didn't need that testimony. So that was kind of a waste of everyone's time. And then we had, looks like Detective Clifford Mogg. That's the last person that we saw. And he did a very good job of showing us the route that the assailant took to meander around the city before going to the crime scene, and then kind of walking around this neighborhood before actually going to Mr. Gehrman's home. He did a good job of showing us, still images of the individual inside the vehicle and pointing out certain things about the vehicle that the prosecution wanted the jury to pay attention to. He did point out a small section of the vehicle just below the windshield that was lighter in color than the rest of the vehicle. And apparently they showed the jury another photo of the vehicle in Mr. Tellis's driveway to point out that same discoloration. And they didn't show that to us while they were showing it to the jury, but the jury likely saw that. If that same discoloration was there, then that's pretty good evidence that Mr. Tellis's vehicle was the very same vehicle that the assailant was driving. So depending on what the jury saw that we didn't get to see, there may be some pretty strong evidence linking Mr. Tellis's vehicle to this particular crime. And then he showed a red SUV of the same make and model leaving the crime scene and making it into Mr. Tellis's neighborhood. So all in all, today, I think the prosecution did a good job of establishing the elements of the crime for the most part, and then linking as much as they could Mr. Tellis to the crime. They haven't placed into evidence the actual shoes or that were cut up, or the actual straw hat that was cut up, or the actual duffel bag, but we do have photographs of all of those things. I anticipate that with some of their later witnesses, they're probably going to call different officers to the stand who they're likely going to get that evidence in through at a later time. And with that evidence, plus the vehicle, plus the motive, which she alluded to during opening, but she hasn't put any witnesses on to show the motive, which she alluded to during opening. If they can establish that through testimony of credible witnesses, they may have a case here. They likely have a case here. I'm interested to see exactly what the defense attorney does with the DNA evidence, because in the opening statement, we learned that Mr. Tellis's fingernails had DNA that matched Mr. Gehrman. So I don't know how the defense attorney is going. He can say, all of this is a conspiracy with respect to everything else. But if the proper protocols were met, the chain of custody of all of this evidence was established, and we have matching DNA, I don't know how he's going to get around that. He can't say, it would be very difficult for him to say that the DNA was planted under Mr. Tellis's fingernails without Mr. Tellis knowing that someone was planting something under his fingernails. So I don't know how he's going to get around that. But, you know, we'll see. We've got several days of this trial left. So I hope that you all join me for that. Again, if there's any questions or comments, please drop any questions in the comments after the video. I'll try to answer those before we go live. I'm guessing tomorrow, unless there's, you know, some issue with the court or with the jurors, so that we can continue with the coverage and you'll be well informed before we continue with the coverage tomorrow. Drop the questions in. I'll try to answer them this evening or tomorrow morning before we start. We're likely going to start at about, they're 3 hours ahead of, or I'm sorry, 3 hours behind us here on the East Coast. So at 9 a.m. their time, which would be 12 p.m. our time, that's likely when we're going to start tomorrow. So I hope to see you all here then. For now, my name is Nathan Saunders, and this is The Legal Good, and I thank you again for joining me for this live.